He kisses her while she's unconscious, then finds out she's a girl. Trapped in the Phantom of the Opera. Episode 3. After Polly left, Erik read for a while longer until he suddenly heard voices from the corridor. Tricky and Boyd. They were talking at the top of the stairs, believing no one could hear them. Unfortunately for them, Erik's hearing was far beyond ordinary. His pitch recognition was frighteningly precise. He could pick out exactly which instrumentalist, on which page, in which bar, made a mistake in a complex symphony. He could even hear how much pressure a pianist applied to each key. To him, Tricky and Boyd's whispered conversation was as loud as shouting in a silent field. "Are you sure she'll come?" Boyd asked in a low, anxious voice. "Of course," Tricky replied. "Why would she willingly stay with that freak? What does he even look like?" "Well, I wouldn't say he's hideous. Half his face is actually okay," Tricky said. "But once you see the other half, you won't think that anymore. What if she doesn't read our letters? What if she throws all 3 away?" Boyd lowered his voice further. "You don't know how guarded that girl is. I've spent days walking with her, watching shows, listening to music. Any other girl would have caved by now, but her? She won't even let me hold her hand." "That's because you're an idiot," Tricky snapped. "You're too hung up on acting like a gentleman. If you just had the guts to take her by force, none of this would be an issue." Boyd fell silent. "So, are we doing this or not?" Tricky pressed. "Once it's done, she and her money are yours. Erik is mine. You do realize that wallet belonged to Dawes, right? That guy was worse than me. He killed plenty of freaks for cash. You saw how fat that wallet was?" After several long seconds, Boyd finally clenched his jaw and said, "Fine. Have her go to the garden villa," Tricky instructed. "And remember, we're not low-life thugs like Dawes. Keep it clean. No need for knives or guns if we can help it. I'm just worried." "Nothing to worry about," Tricky said calmly. "You may have lost a finger, but you're still a handsome young man. Women like handsome men." Boyd hesitated. "You've never actually spent time with her. She doesn't seem to care much about my looks." "Oh, for God's sake," Tricky said, exasperated. "Where's your confidence? I'll put it this way. Unless she's blind, there's no way she'd choose Erik over you." With that, Boyd finally agreed. They flagged down a hotel servant, tipped him, and gave instructions to deliver 3 letters. The first during lunch, the remaining 2 at dinner. The servant promised to follow through. Once everything was arranged, Tricky and Boyd left. The hallway fell silent again, save for the cleaning staff's trolley rolling across the carpet. Erik stared blankly at the book in his hand. He had pulled it randomly from Polly's room bookshelf. Because she had said, "I can keep you company." No one had ever said that to him before. Out of curiosity, he had stayed. The book was dull and lifeless. The male and female leads met, fell in love, clung to each other like magnets, tasted each other's lips and tongues, swapped saliva. Then halfway through, they suddenly began questioning their love. "Do you only love my face? Do you only love my fortune?" Expressionless, Erik closed the book and returned it to the shelf. Unlike other men, he never fantasized from explicit text. He didn't touch himself. He viewed desire coldly, like an outsider. He stared at his own inappropriate impulses until they withered away. Likewise, he never felt anything for romance stories. He would never fall in love, and no one would ever love him. From birth, he had been destined for rejection, exile, and pursuit. He had never considered himself human, and thus never felt any obligation toward humans, nor any affection. And yet, the words from the book began to blur and float before his eyes, like pale, shapeless ghosts. "Do you only love my face? Do you only love my fortune?" Did he have fortune? Yes. He was a master of political assassination. He could take a life without anyone knowing. After leaving Persia, Sultan Hamid II had written to him, hoping he'd come to Constantinople to build secret doors, hidden chambers, and safes for the Ottoman Empire. Rich men were good at making money. He was good at extracting it, like stripping fat from bone. Fame and wealth meant nothing to him. He could have as much as he wanted. What he lacked. "Do you only love my face?" Erik paused, pulled the book from the shelf again, and threw it into the fireplace. Flames crackled, quickly devouring the brittle paper. But the questions, those words from the lovers, rose from the page, hovering before his eyes. In the flickering light, the text turned red, as if soaked in blood, deeply unsettling. "Do you only love my face? Do you only love my fortune?" Now, The questions were directed at him. When the book had burned completely to ash, Erik left Polly's room. Polly had been waiting for Erik to show up so she could personally hand him the 3 letters. This was a perfect moment to earn favor. She wasn't about to miss it. But Erik had vanished again, without a trace. Her heart began pounding wildly. He wasn't going to disappear for days again, was he? Saturday was coming soon. Her original plan was to hand him the letters, talk trash about Tricky and Boyd, then attend the medium gathering as bait. Once Tricky and Boyd revealed their true colors, Erik could swoop in and take them down. Plus, who knows how many freaks were locked up in Tricky's hideout, waiting to be turned into taxidermy. By rescuing them, she could prove she didn't judge by appearance and save money on recruiting freak performers. 3 birds, 1 stone. Only problem was, the arrow had vanished. Polly was frustrated. You really shouldn't count on anyone else. Erik was just too unpredictable. She had to make her own backup plan. She changed into men's clothing and went to buy a revolver. She had expected to need ID or permits, but the gun shop owner only cared about one thing: money. He laid out a row of guns in front of her. These are top quality pieces. You can see the markings underneath. If you pay in full, no credit. I'll even rifle the barrel for better accuracy. If you're short on cash, he added, pointing to another display case, I've got pawned guns too. Work just as good. Polly didn't know much about firearms, only that small calibers had lower recoil and were easier to aim. She bought a Colt revolver, trying to act like she knew what she was doing. Half-cocked the hammer, spun the cylinder, then clicked it back in place. She had never fired a real gun, but she had learned some basics for acting roles. Plus, video games often featured revolvers. She wasn't totally clueless. Still, guns weren't exactly easy to use. Handguns especially were hard to aim beyond 50 meters unless you were a sharpshooter. Rifles and snipers were even harder, requiring the shooter to calculate wind resistance, gravity, and bullet drop. She regretted not taking a firearms class while living in LA, but even so, having a gun was better than not having one. If Boyd ever threatened her life, she'd draw the revolver and press it to his body. At that range, there was no missing. Days passed. Erik never showed. Polly tried everything, calling his name, tapping on the walls, leaving notes on the desk, hoping he'd appear. But it was like he had vanished from the face of the earth. Not even that familiar sensation of being watched. Before, even when he was gone, she could always feel his eyes on her, as if he had just stepped into the shadows, observing her every move. Now, not even that remained. Her heart sank completely. The greatest threat in her life had disappeared. She should be relieved, right? But she wasn't. Why? Was it because a new threat was coming? That must be it. Otherwise, maybe she was just insane, developing some twisted dependency on having a knife at her throat. To most people, Polly was an ordinary girl. Her only standout trait was winning the genetic lottery. She was gorgeous, having inherited the best features from both her parents. Other than that, she was a bit of a recluse, not into socializing or outdoor activities. She preferred getting lost in books, games, and scripts. She liked fictional details more than real ones, preferred in-game scenery over real-life views, loved scripted drama more than actual life. She had always thought that feeling, intense, thrilling immersion could only be found in novels, games, or plays. Until Erik appeared. His mind was detached from reality. His past, too. His very existence had nothing to do with the real world. He belonged to a book. The way her heart raced around him was something out of fiction. Polly had never realized until now just how much she needed Erik. In every possible way, she needed him. Saturday arrived. Erik still didn't return. Polly didn't really want to attend the gathering alone, but if she didn't go, Boyd and Tricky might just use force. Lately, they had been lurking around the hotel, watching her every move, tracking her lights, her outings, her routines. So, before leaving, Polly laid out all 3 letters and wrote an extra one to explain everything. She placed it on top, right on the desk. If Erik returned, he'd see it. She wrapped herself in a black cloak. Beneath it, not a dress, but pants and a shirt for easier movement. Her shoes weren't dainty slippers, but sturdy sneakers from her hiking pack. Before leaving, she checked the revolver one last time, ejecting and reloading each bullet, cocking and uncocking the hammer, making sure nothing jammed. Then she tucked the gun into the holster at her waist, pulled down the wide-brimmed hat, and stepped out. Boyd was already waiting at the hotel entrance. He greeted her with lavish praise. "Miss Clement?" "You look stunning," he said warmly. "The mediums are all waiting for you. They've long wanted to hear your story." As she climbed into the carriage, Polly looked back one final time. Still no sign of Erik. Not even that familiar sense of being watched. Why? Was he in trouble? Had Tricky captured him? Unlikely. If Tricky had caught Erik, Polly would have lost all leverage. The only reason Boyd was smiling at her now was because he wasn't sure whether Erik was watching. "What are you looking at?" Boyd asked. Polly replied coolly. "Didn't you say you sensed a ghost's presence around me? Maybe I'm looking at something you can't see." Boyd was visibly unsettled, but he quickly recovered, smiling again. "Oh, I can see ghosts, of course. What I meant was, you're safe with us. Spirits fear mediums. With so many around, the ghost won't dare bother you today," Polly said flatly. "And what if the ghost I see is alive?" She raised her eyes and stared straight at Boyd. "What would you do then?" Boyd was an expert liar. He knew how to control every facial muscle to craft the perfect expression. But for a moment, just one, his face froze. Cold sweat trickled down his back. He would never forget the day he lost his finger. He had been watching a show when a rope suddenly dropped from above, looped around his neck, and yanked him into darkness. A gloved hand covered his nose and mouth, massive, rough, suffocating. Then the masked man examined his throat, as if deciding where to cut. Boyd had never felt fear like that. That white mask, that hollow, merciless gaze. It didn't see a human being, just livestock. He thought he was going to die. But for some reason, Erik didn't kill him. He dragged Boyd up by the hair and slammed his head into the wall, then calmly, cleanly, sliced off a finger. It was methodical, professional, like he'd done it dozens of times. Afterward, Boyd was too weak to scream. He lay on the floor, wheezing, staring at his severed finger, dizzy and helpless until the usher found him. Tricky had said he was lucky to be alive. Boyd, however, felt doomed. He was certain Erik had spared him only to torment him later. Only Tricky's persistent persuasion had convinced him to try again, reminding him how beautiful and rich Polly was. If he succeeded, he could take her money and take revenge. Otherwise, he would have never gone near her again. Money made the world go round. Blame Polly for taking what didn't belong to her. After a long pause, Boyd finally forced out a weak response. I don't know what you're talking about." Polly noticed something. Boyd was terrified of Erik. She hadn't even said Erik's name, just hinted at him. And Boyd had gone stiff, drenched in sweat. If it ever came down to drawing her gun, maybe she could use Erik's name to rattle Boyd, long enough to press the barrel to his back. Polly was always calmest when the pressure peaked. The carriage entered Garden Villa Street, New Orleans' wealthy district. White mansions nestled among trees, with uniformed guards everywhere. The air was quiet, unlike the bustling hotel area. It was deathly still. Even the flowers and fountains felt frozen, unnaturally silent. People stood, sat, or whispered, all eerily subdued. It was like being underwater. Dark, quiet, with currents you couldn't see. A chill ran down Polly's spine. She had a horrible feeling. Even if she screamed or struggled here, the darkness would drown it all out. No one would hear her. Boyd, sensing her unease, gently took her hand. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'll protect you." Polly stared at his hand. He was missing a finger. Then she remembered. The reason she had sensed a third presence in the theater that day was because Boyd had touched her neck. She had thought Erik had left, but he had been following her. Even into the theater. Was he watching now? Watching as Boyd held her hand, leaned in close, their breaths almost mingling? This wasn't a closed carriage. It was a light two-seater, completely exposed. If Erik was tailing her, he could see everything. Maybe Erik had cut off Boyd's finger because he was a charming liar. Or maybe because she was his prey, and no one else was allowed to touch her. Whatever the reason, Erik wouldn't just stand by. To keep her palms from sweating and slipping on the gun, Polly wore lace gloves, with grip-enhancing texture. She looked at Boyd and tilted her head. "You've never kissed my hand before." Boyd paused. You thought what? That just because I cut my hair and wear pants, I don't deserve the gesture?" No, of course not." He was confused. One moment she was cold, sarcastic. The next, she wanted old-fashioned courtesy. It made no sense, but maybe it did. He was young, handsome, indistinguishable from the wealthy young men around them. If she had feelings for him, that would be perfectly normal. She had two options, him or Erik. To turn her against Erik, Tricky had even hired an artist to paint his face, supposedly 70 to 80% accurate. Even so, Boyd had nightmares after seeing it. It wasn't human. One half was perfect, sharp, clean, flawless. The other half was a skull. Even calling it a skull was generous. Boyd could swear he saw the eyeball wobbling in its socket, like it might fall out at any moment. There were no eyelids, just protruding bone, a deep, gaping socket, and a bare, exposed eye. That was only 70% accurate. Who knew how terrifying the real thing was? No wonder Tricky had said, "Once you see the other half, you won't think he's good-looking anymore." Polly must have changed her mind mid-ride, deciding to charm him instead. After all, she was pretty. Why would she pick a walking corpse over him? Boyd took her hand, bowed, and kissed the back of it. His lips were warm and damp against the lace glove. Polly recoiled inwardly. Strangely, Erik had leaned over her many times before, his hot breath brushing her hair, and even slept beside her. But she had never felt this uncomfortable. Weird. Even weirder. The moment Boyd kissed her hand, she thought of Erik. And then, a sudden stabbing chill pierced her back. A sense of danger she couldn't explain. Her scalp prickled. Goosebumps erupted. Erik was watching. His gaze was heavy and cold, like a block of ice sliding down her hand, slow and wet. Her hand went numb, frozen stiff. But she didn't pull away. She let Boyd hold it. Let Erik watch. The colder his gaze became, the more it drenched and sliced her, the safer she felt. The carriage came to a stop in front of a white villa. The location was intriguing. The backyard bordered a swamp, and beyond that, endless greenish lakes stretched as far as the eye could see. It was hard to tell where the lake ended, and the marsh or grassland began. The entire place looked like a beautiful prison. While Boyd was turning to get out of the carriage, Polly quickly checked the gun holstered at her lower back. Only then did she breathe a little easier. As they approached the villa, a male servant came to greet them. He was tall and muscular, wearing a vest over a shirt. A leather belt around his waist held a holstered revolver with the flap open, revealing a gleaming nickel-plated handle. Polly kept her face calm, but her heart skipped 2 beats. Boyd noticed where she was looking and whispered reassuringly, "Don't worry, they won't shoot us." Just then, a woman approached, about 50 years old, stern-faced, dressed in a modest but well-fitted gown. She reached out to remove Polly's black cloak. Polly stepped back quickly. "No need. I get cold easily." The woman glanced at Boyd. Boyd said, "This is Mrs. Merlin. She won't harm you. She just wants to check whether you're carrying anything that might interfere with the seance." He leaned close to Polly's ear and added with a smile, "Sharp objects like needles, hairpins, brooches, scissors, none are allowed. Ghosts may fear mediums, but given the chance, they'll still harm the living. For safety's sake, it's best to let Mrs. Merlin check for anything you might have forgotten." For a moment, dozens of ideas flashed through Polly's mind, like stepping forward, drawing her gun, and pointing it at Boyd's back to demand they leave. But the male servant was right behind her. She wasn't professionally trained. There was no way she could draw, cock, aim, and fire faster than him. Lie? She couldn't think of one convincing enough to stop the search. Polly took a deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. Rather than being forced to surrender the gun, she decided to take the initiative, keep them guessing about what cards she still held. With that in mind, she suddenly smiled, lifted her hand, and removed the cloak, revealing a shirt and pants underneath. Everyone froze. They'd seen cross-dressing performers before, but never a long-haired woman dressed in men's clothing. Polly had delicate features, wore a wide-brimmed lady's hat adorned with a camellia-like flower, yet her outfit was a man's fitted shirt and tailored trousers. The lines of her neck, shoulders, and legs were revealed with no warning. Boyd was stunned too. He'd seen many women perform in short hair and men's clothes, some even stuffed handkerchiefs into their pants for effect, while others wore trousers with visible discomfort. But Polly gave off a different vibe, like she was born to wear pants. Her confidence was effortless, and no one's gaze could shake her composure. She was too composed, so composed that Boyd didn't dare look directly at her. Polly removed her gun holster. No sharp objects, just this. "Do you want it?" As she expected, the calmer she acted, the less room Boyd had to play it up. He merely gestured for Mrs. Merlin to take the gun. "Don't worry, we'll return it to you later," Boyd said. They moved on, through the grand entrance and into a lavish hallway lined with oval portraits on both sides. "This is Mrs. Healy, the lady of the house," Boyd said, stopping in front of a painting of a dignified woman in a feathered hat. "She's a kind lady who supports the work of mediums and allows us to use her home to welcome guests." Polly got the message. This house was swindled from someone. They entered the drawing room. A coal-burning fireplace roared with such intensity it made the room stifling. A dozen or so women sat on the sofas. When Polly walked in, they all turned to look at her. Their ages varied. Their outfits ranged from elegant to shabby. Some smiled. Others looked curious. A few were cold and stern. One of the stern-looking women rose and approached Polly. She was about 30, with average looks and a velvet dress. She circled Polly once, leaned in close, sniffed her collar, and let out a long sigh. "I smell a powerful evil. Miss Clement, a ghost has latched onto you. Your spirit is so terrified it has forgotten the way home. That is why you can't return." Dusk was falling. The drawing room lights remained off. Only the flickering firelight danced, shadows flowing like tidal waves along the walls. Polly felt like she had stepped into a performance, a grotesque, fantastical play. It was all so absurd, she didn't even feel afraid. She just wanted to see what nonsense they would make up next. "What ghost?" she asked. "And what does it have to do with going home?" "Your spirit told me," another medium chimed in. Someone handed her a piece of paper, which she laid flat on the table. She motioned for Polly to join her in holding a fountain pen. "Now, close your eyes and picture your home. Focus on the spiritual energy in the air. We will enter the spirit world together. Your spirit will speak and tell us the ghost's name." Polly almost laughed. Did they think she was stupid? This was just the old spirit pen trick. Multiple people holding the same pen, asking eerie questions in a spooky setting until someone's nerves twitched and the pen moved by itself. She shrugged and stepped forward to hold the pen with the medium. What made her heart skip wasn't the pen moving. It was Erik's gaze. Back again. She didn't know where he was, but she could feel his oppressive stare, pressing down on her, and the mediums joined hands. Then, without warning, the window flew open. A cold wind gusted in, and the room's temperature dropped sharply. The other mediums thought it was one of their own pulling a trick. They exchanged nods of admiration. Polly had no time to observe their reactions. She was busy trying to guess Erik's location. In this room, every flicker of fire, every shadow that leapt across the walls, could be him moving. Had he read the letter she left? If he hadn't, would he think she was in on this scam with Boyd? And if he thought that, what would he do to her? The medium closed her eyes and began muttering, her grip tight on Polly's hand as she moved the pen across the paper. So tight Polly couldn't even resist if she tried. "Relax, relax," the woman said, voice theatrical. "The spirit is revealing itself. We shall write its dark name." The pen scratched across the paper, and Erik's gaze burned harder into Polly's hand. Stroke by stroke, the letter took shape. E. The woman cried. The first letter of the ghost's name is E. The other mediums crowded around to see. Boyd leaned in and whispered in Polly's ear, "I've never seen such an evil E. That ghost must be demonic." Polly wasn't listening. Erik was still watching her. His gaze crawled up her hand, to her neck, and to her ear. Her heart thundered. Her skin flushed hot, then numb, then stung with a sharp heat. The sensation crept up her neck to her ears, sending shivers down her scalp. Oddly, she didn't feel in danger. Maybe because she had done everything she could to prove her innocence. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt, for once, that she was on track. That she might even win his favor through this. The pen scratched again. The next letter, just a single stroke R, the medium shuddered. E, R, we're almost there. The ghost's form is taking shape. Polly's mind drifted. A voice whispered in her head, "Do you really think you can win his favor? He's uncontrollable. You've always been passive. You've never once guessed what he's thinking. You left a letter. Do you think he'll believe you? He's not the phantom from the original novel, not the romantic lead from the musical. He's the protagonist of a horror film. His job is to kill again and again. Everyone around him, including you, is prey. And yet, he talks to you. He listens. You chat. Haven't you noticed? Even when he speaks to you, His eyes are like a starving animal's. Polly jolted. A gust of wind blew in. The fire leapt. On Boyd's signal, the mediums joined hands and surrounded Polly and the woman at the table. "This ghost is stronger than we imagined. Don't worry, the spirit realm will give us strength. We'll protect you." The pen continued to move. In the darkness, on the white paper, the third letter appeared. I, then the fourth. K. Erik. The medium shouted, "The ghost's name is Erik. I smell the aura of Satan on the paper. He's not a real ghost, just someone who sold his soul to the devil in exchange for power. I've never seen anything like him. Still alive, but a killer, moving like a specter. Listen to me. You must stay away from him. There will be blood if you don't." The performance was reaching its climax. Polly tried to pull her hand away. "And if I don't?" Boyd, as if expecting that, pressed her hand down harder. "You must leave him. I hired an expert." He drew Erik's face. "Once you see it, you'll understand. He's not even human." "Polly, please don't drag me into this." She broke into a cold sweat. Her heart pounded as she struggled to pull away. Boyd grew more desperate, nearly wrapping her in his arms to pin her hand to the table. "Listen to me. He's more evil than you think. See my finger? He cut it off. Don't you want to go home? What if he is the reason you can't?" The table creaked under the pressure. Polly wanted to bite him. Boyd turned to the mediums. "What are you waiting for? Bring the portrait." The moment she heard that, Polly's mind went blank. If Erik saw the portrait, he would go berserk. And then, she didn't know if he'd spare her. She had thought about what she'd say if she ever saw his face. She had imagined her reaction. But not like this. Not surrounded. Not exposed. Not in front of strangers. That face was the source of all his suffering. If not for his appearance, he could have been a genius known across the world. Instead of a monster everyone feared, a sense of danger filled Polly to her core. Every hair on her body stood on end. What now? How could she save herself? If only Erik were nearby, she could kiss him, hug him, anything to boost her survival odds. But she had no idea where he was. Maybe he was already in the shadows, blade in hand, face grim, ready to kill them all. Polly's mind raced. She had to make sure he knew she was innocent. The mediums brought out the portrait, draped in dark red silk. "This painting is cursed," Boyd said. "Even mediums don't dare look at it for long. It invites misfortune." As he spoke, Polly felt a chill knife across her back. Was that Erik's blade? Just as the mediums reached to unveil the painting, Polly closed her eyes and shouted, "Boyd, don't think I don't know what this is. You want to use that portrait to drive a wedge between me and Erik. You think I'll fall for it? I know what. Tricky's planning. He wants Erik to work for him, but Erik's too smart, too powerful. He needs manipulation to win him over, and I'm just part of the scheme." Boyd hadn't expected such eloquence. He froze, then snapped out of it, shouting, "She's possessed. Get the holy water." Polly snapped, "Holy water my ass. You think I'm an idiot?" She turned to the mediums. "And you, do you think I don't know you're all fakes? Give me a pen and paper. I'll outact you all." "I can't go home because of Erik? You don't even know where I live." The room went dead silent. Boyd, a career con man, had never seen such a sharp, clear-headed victim. He shakily pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and took a drag. Time passed. Finally, a woman whispered, "Mr. Boyd." Annoyed, he rolled up his sleeves and paced. "What now? If you've got something to say, spit it out. I have to tell Tricky this plan's blown. She knows everything." The door just opened. "And the wall lights are out," another woman added. "I lit them myself. They're under glass. How did they go out?" At the same time, the fire in the fireplace suddenly extinguished. The room plunged into darkness. An impossible feat. The fire was burning strong. No wind, no water, yet snuffed out. The women panicked. They were only actors, clueless about the spirit world. Now they thought something truly supernatural was happening. "Mr. Boyd, what's going on?" "I want to go home." "You said there were no real ghosts." Boyd, fed up, barked, "There aren't any ghosts. Can't you see? The lights are out because someone did this." "Damn it, this time I brought a gun." "I have a gun." He raised his voice. "I'm not afraid. If he shows up, I'll shoot him dead." Before he could finish, the chandelier above them jolted violently. Everyone screamed. The chandelier was enormous, ornate, layered with crystal beads dangling like necklaces from gold candle holders. It had always hung still. Now it thrashed wildly, on the verge of collapse. One supernatural event after another, Boyd's mind began to crack. Pale-faced, he stumbled back. "I didn't want to cross you. This was all Tricky's idea. He said if I lured the girl here, I'd get Dawes' wallet. Tricky planned everything. I had nothing to do with." With a boom, the fireplace roared back to life. Light returned to the room, and everyone finally saw what was making the chandelier swing. Tricky's head, twisted off at the neck, crushed like a melon. Blood dripping, splattering below. Screams erupted. Boyd's eyes bulged. His chest heaved as he let out a scream of pure terror. Even Polly was a little shaken. She backed up, heart pounding in her throat, struggling to breathe. This was like being inside a horror film. She had no sympathy for Boyd, Tricky, or the fake mediums. If their plan had worked, she might have ended up headless too. Still, the shock was real. She needed a moment. Then, a gloved hand covered her eyes. Cold, firm, smelling faintly of leather. Polly shuddered, but not from fear. He had shown the others horror. But for her, he shielded her from it. Night had fallen completely. Inside the drawing room, the darkness thickened, like blood, like a rising tide, surging and spreading. Boyd glanced around frantically, desperately searching for his gun, only to realize it was gone. There was only one person who could have taken it. His breaths came fast and sharp, nearly scaring himself with the sound of his own panicked gasps. Then he saw a tall figure appear behind Polly. The man wore a white mask, his gaze cold and weary. A black overcoat draped over a white shirt, black leather gloves on his hands. One of those gloved hands slowly reached up to cover Polly's eyes. Erik. Boyd felt a chill shoot straight to the top of his skull. He instinctively held his breath, terrified that even the sound of his exhale might draw Erik's attention. It looked like Erik was going to kill Polly. One hand covered her eyes, the other curled around her throat. Even though they were on the same side, he still wanted to kill her. He was insane. Boyd trembled all over, his body hunched as he quietly crept toward the drawing room door. The group of female mediums had fled the moment they saw Tricky's severed head. Not a single one stayed behind. Cowards, the lot of them. He had fed them, clothed them, sheltered them, and in the end, none of them were useful. If even one had stayed, he could have used her as a human shield. Boyd kept retreating, keeping a close eye on Erik's every move. To his disbelief, Polly had gone insane too. She grabbed Erik's hand and kissed the palm. She didn't seem to sense Erik's murderous intent at all. Instead, she rubbed her cheek gently against his gloved hand. Was this how she'd survived? By offering herself to the devil? Who in their right mind would kiss a monster, unless it was to stay alive? Sure enough, Erik paused. Slowly, he released her throat and looked up at Boyd. Boyd, knowing death was imminent, was suddenly overwhelmed by malice. A desperate idea surfaced in his mind. This girl had gotten his finger cut off and had gotten Tricky's head hung from a chandelier. She kissed the devil's hand, thinking she'd found a way to control him. But did she really know what the man she kissed looked like? Boyd let out a twisted laugh, consumed by spite. Let's see how she reacts when she sees the portrait. If I'm going to die anyway, I'm dragging her down to hell with me. With that, he dashed toward the painting, lifted it upright onto the table, and yanked away the crimson cloth covering it. This painting's 70 or 80% accurate. Don't you want to know what kind of man you've been kissing? Boyd roared. Open your eyes, look at it. Tell me, is that even a human face? You've read books, you know about genetics. So tell me, what kind of parents could give birth to something that's half human, half skull? He didn't get to finish. A rope suddenly looped around his neck. There was a loud crack. His spine snapped under immense force. This wasn't human strength. If this wasn't the work of an evil spirit, what was? That was Boyd's last thought before his neck twisted grotesquely and his white spine pierced through the skin as he crumpled to the floor. Polly saw none of it. She had kept her eyes shut the entire time. She had sensed Erik's intent to kill. Her assumption that he was shielding her from the gore had been wrong. When he covered her eyes, he hadn't been protecting her. He'd been planning to end her silently. His black gloves were cold and lifeless. When they slowly grazed her neck, it felt like ice water coursing through her veins, freezing her in place. In a panic, Polly pretended not to notice. She grabbed the hand at her throat and lowered her head to kiss it. The scent of blood hit her nose instantly. This was a killer's hand. There might still be traces of Tricky's blood on the glove. Just the thought that she might have brushed her lips against the blood of the dead nearly made her gag. She fought the urge to vomit and gently rubbed her cheek against his palm. He didn't move. He let her do it. His murderous intent seemed to fade. But just then, Boyd suddenly lost it, screaming for her to look at Erik's portrait. In that moment, Polly could have cursed 100 times over. Why was this man so obsessed with dragging her down with him? Didn't he have a gun? Why not use it to bargain with Erik? Whether Boyd lived or died wasn't her concern. But if he died too quickly, she'd be left alone with Erik in this room. In the end, Boyd did die. His fear of Erik, combined with his hatred for Polly, left him with no will to resist. He died without a struggle, his neck snapped by Erik's rope. Silence fell over the drawing room once again, deathly silence. Polly couldn't see anything. She strained to listen. Where was the painting? Had Boyd uncovered it? Was it safe to open her eyes now? After killing Boyd, Erik let go of her eyes. She didn't know what he was doing now. When you close your eyes, it's not pure darkness. You can still perceive the play of light and shadow. She saw his silhouette moving in front of her. It seemed Erik was surveying the room, inspecting everything. Then came a loud crash. He had thrown the portrait into the fireplace. Flames roared to life. Next came the sound of rustling fabric. He had lifted Boyd's corpse and was searching his clothes. Polly listened to the fire crackle, wondering how long it would take for the painting to burn completely. Her legs were growing stiff. She couldn't stay silent forever. She had to break this tension. She needed him to speak. Only then could she find a way out. The darkness, the fear, the blood, the danger, the feeling of being watched, the cold gloves, the desperate thud of her own heartbeat. So many chaotic emotions churned inside her that her throat tasted like adrenaline, bitter and metallic, as if she'd swallowed blood. Then Erik seemed to finish checking Boyd's body. He walked toward her. His tall figure loomed with oppressive force, like a living shadow about to consume her. Polly jolted, blurting out, "Did you read the letter I left?" He stopped. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her throat. Polly was drenched in sweat from head to toe, as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over her. After a long pause, his voice finally came, cold and low, sending shivers down her spine. "A letter?" Polly instinctively rubbed her shoulder against her ear. It had been too long since she heard his voice. Every syllable gave her goosebumps. "I knew their intentions from the beginning," she said, steadying herself. "I meant to give you their letters directly, but then you vanished. I was afraid you'd think I was in on it, so I wrote a note and placed it on top. It's on the desk in the hotel room. Didn't you read it?" He didn't respond, but she didn't need him to. "I don't care what they say, or what you look like," she continued. "All I know is, you've saved me multiple times. Without you, I'd be dead in that circus camp." It was the truth. If not for him, she would have never found out that Richard hadn't followed her plan to steal the hiking pack, but had tried to collaborate with the manager instead. "You might think," she drew a deep breath, "that I chose you in the woods over the manager because I was sure you'd kill him. But that's not it. I knew the manager didn't really want me. A hiking bag can be opened in many ways. But there's only one you. I was very aware at the time. His goal was to drive a wedge between us. Only then could he convince you to go back and serve him again. Half truths, half lies." She did understand the manager's motives, but she also believed Erik could kill him. "I didn't know what kind of person you were back then," she said, swallowing. "But now I trust my own judgment more than anyone else's. The manager said you're cold-blooded, ruthless, and dangerous. But after all this time together, I think you're not dangerous at all. You're actually kind." Erik's voice came, abrupt and icy. "Kind? Remember what the manager said in the woods? That you were a dangerous criminal from Persia, and that he gave you freedom? He always claimed you were ungrateful, never repaid him. But I think you did repay him. After everything Mac did to you, dragging you behind a horse, you had 1,000 ways to kill him. But in the end, you didn't. Isn't that repayment?" He remained silent. "Boyd kept calling you a demon, a ghost," she said, exhaling. "But in my eyes, you're not just a genius in every field. You also have a kind heart. I could never believe that you're a demon." Polly had talked herself hoarse, as if she'd added 180 filters of beautification to Erik's character. Even so, he remained dangerously silent. Her heart seized. Had she gone too far? Whether Erik was kind was debatable, but he did spare those who had helped him. If she hadn't tried to help him on the day she arrived, cleaning his wounds, feeding him medicine, someone as cold and suspicious as him would have likely killed her already. Her heart pounded so hard her chest ached. Cold sweat trickled down her cheek. Not knowing how he felt, she could only forge ahead with flattery. "I didn't open my eyes because I was scared of your face," she said softly. "It's because I was waiting." He finally spoke. "Waiting for what?" "Waiting for you to let me see your face," she replied, her voice taut and raspy. Erik stared at her with a gaze that was cold and judging. Before coming here, he had considered many possibilities. He'd seen the letters she left, but assumed it was a trap meant to lure him into the villa. Everything between her and Boyd during the journey, he had seen it all. Even missing a finger, Boyd was still young and handsome, graceful and polite, the perfect gentleman. He had kissed her gloved hand. They looked like a perfect couple, like characters from a French novel. Erik saw the carriage stop at the villa. She stepped out gracefully, removed her cloak to reveal a shirt and trousers, and handed over her gun. To him, all humans were the same. He didn't feel shame about his own body, just like a beast doesn't feel shame for its prey losing its fur. But her figure, those slender, elegant lines, stabbed into his eyes like red-hot thorns. His eyes throbbed painfully, his temples pounded, his heartbeat seemed to move into his eyes. She must have known he was there. She had rejected the medium's lies, refused to look at the portrait, as if she knew anyone who saw it would die. So far, she had given him so many unrealistic experiences. Her every word and gesture felt like a dream. Only someone in a dream would choose him so firmly, believe in him so completely. Compelled by something he couldn't explain, he had covered her eyes, not wanting her to see the horror. But then he coldly thought, if this was a dream, then he was ready to wake up. Yet she grabbed his hand, kissed his palm, and nuzzled against it. She said he was kind, a genius. Until now, he had only felt shame when she looked at him. But in that moment, her thoughts, her words, her tone, her closed eyes, her moving lips, the tongue between them, every breath, all of it filled him with unbearable shame, almost humiliation, as if she were mapping his face inch by inch with her words, while stabbing her fingers into his wounds, twisting until they touched a nerve. His expression grew cold. He nearly couldn't restrain himself. Polly had no idea how close she had come to pushing him over the edge. She was thinking about how to steer the conversation forward. Waiting wouldn't bring answers, but asking might enrage him. After weighing her options, she tilted her head slightly and said as gently and innocently as she could, "I've told you everything I think. Whether you believe me or not, I feel like we've cleared up any misunderstandings. But I still want to ask one question. May I?" No answer, which meant, "Go on." "When?" she asked slowly. "Can I see your face?" This time, his reply came swiftly, cold and absolute. "Never." "Then don't look." Polly thought to herself, well, the heroine will end up removing your mask anyway. Once the portrait had burned to ashes, Erik finally allowed Polly to open her eyes. She gave Boyd's corpse a quick glance and felt a headache coming on. Sure, both Tricky and Boyd had gotten what they deserved. One made his living murdering people with deformities, the other scammed women out of money and affection, but the police didn't know that. Would Erik be arrested? Would those fleeing female mediums report him? How was she going to help him get out of this? At that moment, footsteps sounded outside the parlor. Polly tensed instantly, fearing the police had arrived. She quickly rehearsed her innocent explanation in her mind, only to see it was Mrs. Merlin. Holding a lantern with a blank expression, Mrs. Merlin looked at Boyd's body, then glanced up at Tricky's severed head hanging from the chandelier. Her tone was detached. "They're finally dead." Then she turned her gaze to Polly and Erik. "You don't need to wait around. The police won't come. Tricky was in the business of dealing with freaks. He already paid off the police. No matter what happens here, they won't care." "Polly, why are you so calm about this?" "Because those two were scum," Mrs. Merlin said coldly. "They tricked the mistress into lending them the house, and then used it for murder, rape, and kidnapping. I told her many times Boyd was no good, but she refused to believe the seances were fake." "Why?" Polly asked. "Because she saw a real ghost," Mrs. Merlin replied. Polly frowned slightly. "A real ghost?" No matter how she tried to probe further, Mrs. Merlin refused to say another word. Erik remained silent the whole time, only moving when Mrs. Merlin asked them to leave. He carried Tricky's severed head in one hand and dragged Boyd's body by the collar in the other, ready to walk out just like that. Polly nearly couldn't bear to look. She was about to suggest he put them down, but he calmly said, "They're wanted criminals. There's a bounty." Polly. She couldn't believe she just got schooled on bounty law by a horror movie protagonist. A bounty? Before Erik could answer, Mrs. Merlin cut in impatiently. "Have you never been to a post office or train station? Their wanted posters are everywhere. Dead or alive, $50 each. I was going to keep their corpses and cash in myself, but since you want them, take them. Now get out. I have floors to clean." Polly quickly put the pieces together. So Tricky's obsession with recruiting Erik wasn't about turning him into a specimen or a freak show act. He wanted Erik as a bodyguard. At this point in American history, the westward expansion still wasn't complete. Law enforcement was sorely lacking. Anyone could become a bounty hunter. Tricky must have been chased down a few times already, and not even his bribes to the New Orleans police were helping. Desperate, he set his sights on Erik. He never imagined Erik wouldn't protect him, but would instead become the instrument of his demise. As they were leaving, Polly asked Mrs. Merlin, "You said Tricky made money off people with deformities. Do you know where he kept them?" Mrs. Merlin sneered. "What, you want to make freak specimens too?" "No," Polly explained patiently. "I want to hire them. Offer them proper jobs." "Proper jobs?" Mrs. Merlin said skeptically. "You mean standing on a stage like monkeys while the crowd throws coins at them? Or sending them to hospitals for testing?" Polly kept her tone calm and composed. "You've misunderstood. I mean real work, where they act as true performers, using story, acting, and personal charm to win over the audience. Not just relying on how they look. And why should I believe your nonsense?" Mrs. Merlin said. Polly glanced briefly at Erik, then lowered her lashes and said softly, "I'm not trying to win your trust. I just made a promise. To show someone that pity is just another kind of privilege. And that with it, even people with deformities can become stars of the stage." At that, Erik turned his gaze toward her. Polly wasn't sure if she had laid it on too thick, but lately, whenever Erik looked at her, his eyes were chillingly cold, like knives ready to dissect and judge her. He really was getting stranger. In the past, praising him had at least earned her some favor. Now, it only seemed to trigger him. Surprisingly, though, her words didn't earn Erik's approval, but they did soften Mrs. Merlin's expression. Mrs. Merlin studied her for a long time, then said, "Didn't expect someone who looks like a street girl to talk like a well-educated lady." "Polly, I'm not a street girl." Even as she denied it, she couldn't help wondering, what exactly about her gave off street girl vibes? But in Mrs. Merlin's eyes, Polly wore a wide-brimmed hat, a shirt and trousers. Her face was strikingly beautiful, and her eyes were too bright. Bright even in the presence of a severed head and a corpse. Only women unbound by society, street girls, swindlers, or rebels, had that kind of light in their eyes. A noble lady, like the mistress of the house, had her light slowly drained away by the house, until all that remained was a still dead pond. Mrs. Merlin said coolly, "You talk a good game, but sorry, I still don't believe you. You can go now." Polly didn't argue. She sensed Mrs. Merlin's attitude had begun to soften. A few more days and a little more coaxing might be enough to get her to reveal where the freaks were being kept. Besides, Polly also wanted to know what ghost the lady of the house had seen. But clearly, that was a topic Mrs. Merlin wasn't willing to discuss, for now. As she neared the exit, Polly turned to glance at the portrait of the mistress, Mrs. Healy. Was it just her imagination? The painting gave off a strange, unsettling feeling, like something that didn't belong had been added to it. She was about to look more closely when Mrs. Merlin stepped out, staring at her blankly. Not wanting to offend her, Polly gave an awkward half-curtsy and turned to leave. Erik followed behind her calmly, carrying the severed head and corpse without a trace of emotion. The whole scene was disturbingly bizarre. Polly didn't dare look back at him. Once outside, Erik nonchalantly tossed Tricky and Boyd into the carriage, the luxury one that had belonged to Tricky. Polly had wanted that carriage. But after what she just saw, she decided, no thanks. After that, Erik climbed into the driver's seat and took the reins. Afraid he might leave her behind, Polly was just about to scramble up. But then he pulled off his black glove, tossed it aside, and reached out a hand to her. He might not have realized it, but this was the first time he had ever extended a hand to her. a bare hand. That thought startled Polly. No one usually thinks of a hand as bare, but Erik's obsessive aversion to physical exposure had clearly rubbed off on her. And now that the thought was planted, it wouldn't go away. Even in the dim light of night, his hand was exceptionally beautiful. Long, defined fingers, clean bones like polished white jade, with faint blue veins just beneath the surface. So perfect it felt forbidden, like something sacred she shouldn't dare touch. Her gaze lingered too long. She practically scanned every inch, from knuckles to veins to wrist bones to the firm muscles of his forearm. He couldn't take it anymore and said coldly, "Get in." Polly snapped out of it, took his hand, and climbed up. They rode in silence. From the carriage, the smell of blood drifted up without end. Polly felt like she'd been having a nosebleed all night. Everything reeked of blood. It was early morning. The streets were shrouded in fog, cold, damp, echoing with the sound of wheels squelching through mud. Tracks crisscrossed the ground, leftovers from the day before. There were more homeless people than Polly had imagined. Even this late, the streets weren't empty. People sat on curbs, spaced out or sleeping. Some were already awake, spitting and washing their faces. A woman stepped out with a chamber pot and casually dumped it in the street. Suddenly, Polly felt a wave of loneliness. She had been alone in foreign countries before, but this time was different. She felt like her soul was trapped in something. Even after being tricked once, hearing Mrs. Merlin mention a ghost made her want to dig deeper. Suddenly, the carriage jerked violently around a corner. Erik's driving was usually smooth, but this turn nearly flung her out. Did he forget she was sitting beside him? To avoid being thrown again, she shoved her homesickness aside and clung tightly to his arm, determined not to get whiplashed into the mud. 10 minutes later, the carriage stopped outside the police station. Erik walked in with Tricky and Boyd's wanted posters to claim the bounty. The sheriff, seeing someone enter wearing a mask, thought he was being robbed and reached for his gun. Polly quickly stepped in to explain. Only then did the sheriff, still suspicious, lower his weapon. So those two scammers are now calling themselves Tricky, and Boyd can't trust anyone these days. He blew his nose with a handkerchief and acted completely unaware of their recent chaos in the city. If Mrs. Merlin hadn't mentioned that Tricky had bribed the police, Polly might have actually believed him. They've used countless names, running scams and harming people. Just drop them here. Here's your reward. Polly picked up the cash and counted it. Only $50? I thought it was 50 each. 100 total? Enough. The sheriff waved her off and lounged back in his chair, feet on the desk. You don't look like professional bounty hunters. I'm letting the murder slide and giving you $50. Consider yourselves lucky. Polly's mind worked fast. She removed her wide-brimmed hat to reveal her short hair, propped one foot on a chair, and spat theatrically on the floor. What makes you think this is my first bounty? Let me tell you something. Before Tricky and Boyd died, they confessed a whole lot of juicy stuff. Of course, we're not good Samaritans, but if you want us to keep our mouths shut, just hand over the other 50. The sheriff's face darkened. You threatening me? Polly grinned. Not at all. You know how our kind are. Just trying to stay on good terms with the law, not looking to stir the pot. Seeing her short hair, pants, and the fact that she took down 2 wanted criminals, the sheriff started to believe she might be the real deal. There were female gunslingers back then. For a woman to be a bounty hunter, she had to be tougher than any man, faster with her hands and deadlier with her aim. The sheriff decided not to stir trouble. He rummaged in a drawer, pulled out another $50, and tossed it to her. Fine. For the lady. Polly beamed and pocketed the money. Thanks, Sheriff. Erik watched coldly from the side. Let's go, he said suddenly. Polly didn't mind his tone. She happily counted her cash and followed him out of the station. The fog had thinned. The lamplighters were starting to turn off the gas lamps. That strange wave of loneliness washed over her again. The 19th century resembled the modern era in many ways, but also felt entirely alien. That sense of being out of sync with the whole world. She couldn't afford to dwell on it too long, or she'd lose her grip. Then she caught a glimpse of Erik's figure, and that flicker of loneliness vanished. She had too much to do. She needed to keep winning Erik over. Ask Mrs. Merlin about the freaks. Find out what ghosts the mistress had seen. She needed to write scripts for the freaks, plan performances, find a way to show Erik that she didn't care about appearances. Most importantly, she needed to make Erik stop killing people. This time, he'd happened to kill wanted criminals and earned a bounty. But what about next time? 19th century America was lawless, but not lawless enough. She had to find a time to talk to him. Tell him, only kill the bad ones. Leave the good ones alone. Also, the carriage. The cabin was soaked in blood. She needed to hire someone to clean it. Whenever she saw Erik, she felt buried in work. Loneliness had no space to exist. So why had she felt lonely earlier? What a joke. No wonder she always thought he carried a strange sense of security. Now she knew why. Polly climbed into the carriage and sat beside Erik. Then, after a pause, she leaned forward, bracing herself on the driver's seat, and kissed his white mask. Thank you. It was part flattery, part gratitude. Their relationship hadn't changed. She was still the prey, and he was the hunter. The one who stalked, chased, cornered, and could crush her throat at any moment. But her feelings toward him had shifted slightly. It was wrong, inappropriate, unhealthy, but she needed this wrongness to survive. Polly wrapped herself around his arm and closed her eyes. Erik's expression didn't change, but if one looked closely, they'd see tension from his jaw to his forearm. There was a dagger in his boot, a rope on his belt. He could kill her with one hand. He didn't even need a weapon, just one sudden motion, and she'd fall to her death. He had countless ways to stop her from getting too close. But in the end, he did nothing. He just sat there, letting her press against his arm, feeling her warmth seep into him like needles, like thorns, paralyzing him. Polly bought some baking soda, poured it into a bucket of water, stirred it into a paste, and asked the cleaners to scrub the blood-stained carriage with it. Turns out, binge-watching American TV shows really pays off. After one night, the bloodstains came off easily. Polly had thought Erik wouldn't care about something so trivial, but to her surprise, he stood beside her the entire time, watching her mix the baking soda, sprinkle vinegar on the carriage, and direct the cleaners as they scrubbed. Under his intense stare, the cleaners broke out in a cold sweat, barely daring to breathe. Polly found it odd, too. Why was Erik suddenly so interested in everything she did? Honestly, she preferred the version of him that ignored her completely. Because if he ever got curious and started interrogating her about where she learned these things, or where she was really from, she'd be screwed. His memory was terrifying, his perception even more so. She still remembered how he once recreated the pattern of disturbed hairs caught in a doorframe. If she hadn't had photographic evidence from her phone, he might have convinced her it never happened. Right now, the only reason she could still lie to him was because he didn't ask. If he ever did ask, she wouldn't be able to lie. If her lie was exposed, she'd lose his trust. And losing his trust meant losing her life. Polly was sweating nervously, silently praying life wouldn't crank up the difficulty again. Thankfully, Erik didn't say a word, just watched, made no comments, and didn't ask any questions. Polly breathed a quiet sigh of relief. She quickly pushed the matter to the back of her mind. With the carriage clean, she moved on to the next task, getting close to Mrs. Merlin. Mrs. Merlin seemed to be one of those cold on the outside, warm on the inside types. A sturdy, serious-faced woman who rarely smiled, yet every time Polly visited, she'd offer a plate of pastries, silently watch her eat, and then dismiss her with a curt nod. After a few visits, Polly learned that Mrs. Merlin's husband had been dead for over a decade and she had no children. She considered Mrs. Healy, the mistress of the house, her own daughter. Whenever Mrs. Healy came up, Mrs. Merlin would fall into a long silence. "I don't want to talk about her," she said one day. "If you're here to dig into the mistress's affairs, you can leave now." "I've nothing to say," Polly replied. "You know I'm not here for Mrs. Healy." Mrs. Merlin paused for a long moment, then let out an odd laugh. "So, you really aren't in the business of selling freak specimens?" The air shifted. Polly rubbed her arms, goosebumps prickling across her skin. She glanced around. It was 3 p.m, sun blazing outside. Even if ghosts were real, this wasn't the time they'd show up. "How about this?" Polly said carefully. "Blindfold me and take me to meet them. If they don't want to leave, I promise I'll never come back." Mrs. Merlin seemed to consider it. In the end, she must have decided it was better to get rid of Polly once and for all. "All right," she said, her voice sticky and unsettling. "I hope you're a girl who keeps her word." Polly's eyes were blindfolded. Before coming, she'd brought a gun. Mrs. Merlin frisked her and took it. She always did, ever since the first time Polly showed up armed. But Polly still had a small knife hidden in the pocket of her underskirt. Mrs. Merlin's sudden shift in tone had put her on edge. She slipped her hand inside her skirt and gripped the knife. Maybe it was just her imagination. If Mrs. Merlin meant her harm, she would have acted long ago, not waited until now. Then Polly heard shuffling. Mrs. Merlin seemed to be pulling back a rug and unlocking a trapdoor with a heavy key. Polly felt a strange unease. Mrs. Merlin had been hiding the freaks in the basement. Mrs. Merlin helped her up. Come on. There's a staircase. Her hand was firm and strong. Her voice was getting stickier, and her breath carried an odd scent that blew directly onto Polly's face. Careful now. If you fall, I'm not taking you to the hospital. Polly froze, reaching up to pull off the blindfold. Actually, maybe let's do this another time. Another time? Mrs. Merlin laughed, grabbed Polly's wrist, and twisted her arm behind her back. There is no next time, darling. Polly had completely underestimated her strength. No matter how much she struggled, Mrs. Merlin held her in a vice grip. With muscles bulging, she shoved Polly straight into the basement. Polly tumbled headfirst into a pile of hay. The stench of sweat hit her like a wave, and the impact left her too stunned to move. I don't deal in normal people. Mrs. Merlin's voice echoed from the entrance. That'll send you straight to hell. But you kept asking about that little slut Healy. She betrayed me. I treated her like my own daughter, and she ran off with another woman, taking my jewelry and leaving me in this godforsaken house alone. You're both freaks, Mrs. Merlin sneered. She doesn't love men, only women. And you, interested in helping freaks become stars? Her voice dripped with mockery and disgust. You freaks are all the same. Piss me off enough, and you pay the price. With that, she slammed the trapdoor shut, slid the bolt into place, and locked it. It was a while before Polly could sit up, dizzy and sore. Thankfully, she had worn a multi-layered dress to win Mrs. Merlin's favor. Without all those petticoats cushioning her fall, she might have broken something. Polly was annoyed with herself. She'd let her guard down. If Mrs. Merlin had been a good person, she wouldn't have reacted so calmly upon seeing a corpse. Polly herself had grown numb to death after all she'd seen. Circus guards, the manager, all dying in horrific ways. But she was from a modern world, used to horror games, movies, grotesque imagery. For Mrs. Merlin, a servant of a wealthy lady, that kind of reaction was anything but normal. Polly winced, sucking in a painful breath. She should have seen it. 10 minutes later, she had gathered herself enough to look around. The basement wasn't large, barely 10 square meters. A single rushlight lamp flickered on a pillar. The air was damp and foul, the walls filthy and stained with black spots. At first, Polly thought they were bugs. Looking closer, she saw it was dried blood, so dark it had turned brown, like crusted paint that flaked off in powdery bits. This wasn't a nightmare. She had never seen this much blood in a dream. Not with this level of detail. No time for regret. Once she had the strength, Polly began inspecting the room. In the back, she found a writing desk with a cabinet above and drawers below. Inside one drawer, she found a notebook. She opened it. B. We sold. Theo. Wit. Emily Brown. Ollie Thorne. Sold. Harriet Fielding. Edmund Boo. Sold. Far. Saint. The handwriting was neat but childish, clearly Mrs. Merlin's. She couldn't spell many surnames. Some were abbreviated or missing entirely, and then she saw it. Emily's name. Sold likely meant those people had already been sold. Mrs. Merlin had been working with Tricky all along. Polly rubbed her forehead hard. This was the second time she'd fallen into their trap. If Mrs. Merlin had been a modern woman, Polly might have been more cautious. She'd never have entered a stranger's home so easily. She had underestimated 19th century people, assuming no phone or internet meant a middle-aged woman couldn't be dangerous. In truth, someone who could aid fugitives like Tricky and Boyd was already dangerously unhinged. Self-blame was pointless. She needed to get out. Polly pulled the small knife from her underskirt. She'd stab Mrs. Merlin in the throat the next time she opened that door. Ever since that time in the swamp where she lost track of time, she had started carrying a pocket watch. Well, at least she was learning. That was something, right? She checked the watch. It was 3:30 p.m. No idea when Mrs. Merlin would come back. So she took off her jacket, laid it on the ground, and decided to get some rest. At 8 p.m., she was jolted awake by the sound of the lock opening. Mrs. Merlin tossed a boy into the basement like garbage. "Here's your freak," she said, just like you asked. "This kid looks just like the Elephant Man from London. If you've got some weird fetish, better act now, once he's famous," she cackled. You won't even be fit to lick his boots. Polly, I don't have any weird fetishes. Really? Mrs. Merlin laughed. I thought you were pestering me about those freaks because you wanted to collect them like toys. Turns out you're just a kind little soul, huh? She let out a loud, mocking laugh. Oh my, I've met a saint. So, Thorn, she said to the boy, what do you think? This girl's asked me about you freaks hundreds of times. I thought she was competition, held off on dealing with her. But no, she's actually nice. Thorn, tell me, want to be a big star? Polly looked at Thorn. He was trembling, curled up in the hay, a burlap sack over his head with 2 eye holes cut out. He looked eerily like Erik. Polly's heart skipped a beat. Sympathy rose unbidden. This was strange. Even when she saw Erik being dragged by a horse, she hadn't felt sympathy, just calculated how best to survive by using him. Even when she saw the wounds on his back, she'd felt more shock than pity, wondering how he could still be so strong. But now, looking at Thorn, someone who resembled Erik, she felt genuine pain. Why? Had her feelings toward Erik changed? Her thoughts spiraled, and she said nothing. Thorn sobbed, terrified, and didn't speak either. After Mrs. Merlin left, Polly crouched beside him, gently asking, "Are you all right?" Thorn flinched and shrank away, clutching the burlap sack tighter over his head. Erik wouldn't have flinched. He would have drawn a dagger and pressed it to her throat, warning her not to come closer. And yet, somehow, their reactions were the same. "I won't hurt you," Polly said, her expression complex. "If I can get you out of here, will you come with me?" Thorn didn't answer. He just panted in fear, holding the sack as if terrified she'd rip it off. Erik never clutched his mask, but he rarely faced her directly, always appeared behind her, like a shadow, like a ghost. If she tried to turn around, he'd clamp her jaw tightly and stop her. He always wore black gloves, black shirts, black vests, black coats, rarely revealing any skin but his neck, as if trying to vanish into the darkness. Was he so obsessed with hiding because, like Thorn, he once failed to protect his mask? That thought made her stomach twist. This wasn't sympathy. It was empathy. "I'm not like Mrs. Merlin," Polly said hoarsely. "I really want to offer you a job. Let you act, tell stories, win over audiences with your talent, not your looks." She'd said this line many times before, half true, half false. But right now, it felt entirely sincere. Why? She asked herself. Maybe because she wasn't so different from Erik or Thorn. She was scared too, scared of someone peeling off her mask, exposing the side of her that didn't belong in this world. "Please trust me," she whispered, inching closer. "I swear, I won't take off the sack. I won't laugh at how you look." A small window in the basement let in a beam of violet-red sunset light. Thorn cried harder, trembling, nearly fainting, but when he realized she wasn't like the others, didn't hit him, yell at him, or tug the sack off, he slowly loosened his grip and looked at her through tear-filled eyes. Polly held out a hand and said gently, "Trust me, Thorn. We'll get out of here." After a long moment, Thorn, still shaking, took her hand and nodded. Polly suddenly thought of the night she escaped the circus. Back then, she felt like she was trudging through a swamp, every step heavy, alone, without hope. And Erik? He had shown no emotion, just followed silently behind, calm as a predator stalking its prey. But just like Thorn now, he had trusted her, trusted that they'd escape. Polly felt something shift in her chest, like a towel soaked in warm water, slowly being wrung tighter and tighter. It hurt, strangely sweet and sad. She was sympathizing with her predator. Thorn looked young, probably no older than 12, his eyes full of innocence. He answered whatever Polly asked. "What's your name?" "Oliver Thorn," Thorn murmured. Polly's tone was gentle on the surface, but her grip on the small knife hidden in her underskirt was tight. If Thorn made a single wrong move, she'd stab him in the arm without hesitation. "Why did Mrs. Merlin lock you in the basement?" "Because..." Thorn trembled, almost convulsing. "I got returned." Only then did Polly remember. She'd seen his name, Ollie Thorn, marked sold in that notebook. "Can you tell me why?" she asked softly. "I promise I won't laugh." Thorn nodded and began stammering out his story. He hadn't been born deformed. At 9, a lump had suddenly appeared on his face. Panicked, he ran to his mother. Her first reaction wasn't concern, but excitement. He could be the next Elephant Man. Thorn's condition matched the famed Elephant Man of London. The original had become famous, even met the British princess. His mother saw opportunity. That was when his nightmare began. His parents turned into his agent and show host, dragging him on tours. $1 for a peek under the burlap sack, $5 to touch and even squeeze the lump on his face. Unfortunately, or fortunately, his deformity wasn't yet severe. Audiences came in high spirits, but left disappointed. To fund the tour, his parents mortgaged their house. When the money didn't come in, they grew anxious and began beating him. Then, as Thorn put it in his own words, which made Polly shudder, luckily, as he got older, the lump grew larger. The show finally became profitable, and the beatings stopped. His parents began calling him their cash cow. That's when Tricky approached them with a smooth pitch and bought him outright. "I was supposed to go to a circus," Thorn whispered, "but it shut down. So a lady from a sideshow bought me instead. She wanted me to do circus tricks at her home, but I didn't know any. I couldn't even talk well. She got bored and returned me." No wonder Mrs. Merlin had been so furious. With Tricky dead, she never got paid and was stuck cleaning up his mess. Sure, she could have refused the refund, but if she wanted to stay in the freak trade, she couldn't afford to anger customers. She had to eat the loss. Polly asked, "Do you trust me?" Thorn glanced at her delicate face and thin arms, hesitating. I don't know. I can't beat Mrs. Merlin. She's too strong." Polly's warm smile vanished. Her tone turned cold. "Suit yourself. If your dream is to become a sideshow freak, letting people gawk at you like a circus monkey, I respect your choice." Polly cut him off. "Think carefully before you speak. If you choose Mrs. Merlin, even if I escape, I won't take you with me. You'll rot in here for the rest of your life. She'll decide your future, maybe even sew your arm to your face to make you a real elephant." Thorn flinched in terror. His world was small. The scariest thing he'd ever heard was being put in a human zoo. His parents used to scare him with that. Polly's words shattered his imagination. No, I don't want that," he stammered. "I trust you. I'll go with you. But I really can't fight her." "You don't have to," Polly said. "Just do exactly as I say and we'll both get out." Thorn nodded. Polly leaned in close and began whispering her plan. Thorn was timid and easily manipulated. To keep him from backing out midway, Polly alternated between gentle coaxing and harsh threats, leaving him so rattled his mind went blank. He froze up like a puppet. "Lie here," she instructed, "and pretend to shake uncontrollably, like someone's about to rip off your mask. Understand?" Thorn mumbled something. Polly leaned in and hissed, "Understand? Or do you want her to cut off your arm?" Thorn jolted and nodded vigorously. Polly checked the time. She planned to pound on the basement door at midnight to wake Mrs. Merlin. People are weakest when sleep deprived. Once awakened, Mrs. Merlin would likely come down angrily, cursing, and careless. Unaware Polly had a knife and overconfident in her strength, she'd walk right into the trap. Then Polly would slip behind her and drive the blade into her throat. Just thinking about it made her heart clench. She told herself, "This is a survival horror game. Don't hesitate. Don't flinch. Don't feel guilty. Banish all emotion." Still, her palms sweated. Worried she'd drop the knife, she tore a strip of fabric from her underskirt and wrapped it tightly around her hand. She mentally rehearsed the stabbing, whether it would kill with one strike. If not, what next? By dawn, her mind was soaked in blood, like a dark red curtain rising on a stage. At 2 a.m., Polly had Thorn curl up on the hay facing the wall. "Remember," she said, "as soon as you hear her voice start shaking, roll around if you can." He nodded. Polly took a deep breath, climbed the stairs, and began banging furiously on the door. "Help, help, Mrs. Merlin, help, Thorn's in trouble. He's dying, please, come quick." Minutes passed. Footsteps approached. Mrs. Merlin's voice came through, irritated. "Stop your damn screaming. You trying to get the cops here, you loudmouth brat?" The bolt scraped open. The door swung wide. Mrs. Merlin, holding a lantern, glared at Polly. "You, back down those stairs. Don't think you can sneak out while I'm checking on the boy. This door locks from both sides." Polly's eyes were swollen from crying. Her voice was hoarse, trembling. "I swear I'm not trying to escape. Please, just look." Thorn's barely breathing. "I don't know what happened. He just started convulsing." I tried to pull the sack off his head to check if it was epilepsy, and it only got worse. Fine, Mrs. Merlin muttered. He doesn't have ID anyway. If he dies, no one will care. Keep screaming and I'll kill you first. Polly flinched and clamped a hand over her mouth, barely stifling a sob. Mrs. Merlin stepped toward Thorn. Let's see what kind of trick this little bastard's pulling. If you two are playing me, I'll beat you both to death. Thorn shivered. Afraid he might break character, Polly cried out, He moved! He's shaking again. What if he starts seizing? Mrs. Merlin snapped, Shut up, girl, or I'll cut your tongue out. Maybe Polly's act was just that good. Or maybe Mrs. Merlin truly thought Polly was a gullible little fool. Either way, she turned her back on Polly and knelt beside Thorn. Now, Polly's eyes locked on the woman's neck. She gripped the knife tight and plunged it in. The next moments blurred. She only remembered blood spraying everywhere, soaking the cloth around her hand, drenching her dress. Her whole body felt heavier, dragged down by the weight of blood. Mrs. Merlin clutched her throat, turned to look at Polly. She tried to speak, but choked out only frothy, blood-tinged spit. Polly had gone completely still, then utterly calm. She didn't give Mrs. Merlin a chance to react, yanked the knife out, and stabbed her again, this time straight into the heart. Mrs. Merlin finally regained a sliver of awareness. Her arm muscles tensed, trying to grab the knife. But the blood made everything slippery. Panic set in. The gash in her neck looked like a second mouth, writhing, spitting blood, over and over, until she collapsed with a thud. Polly tossed the knife aside, fumbled for the key ring on Mrs. Merlin's belt, and tried key after key, finally unlocking the basement door. She pulled the petrified Thorn to his feet and shoved him up the stairs. Then she peeled off her blood-soaked dress, unwrapped the cloth from her hand, and tossed it all onto Mrs. Merlin's corpse, then climbed out after him. I just killed someone. The thought flickered through her mind, then vanished into the night. Polly wiped the blood from her face, found a clean cloak and dress in the bedroom closet, and changed. She rummaged through drawers until she found her gun, confiscated earlier by Mrs. Merlin. Polly grabbed it, turned to Thorn, and said, "Let's go." Thorn nodded numbly. She doused herself in lavender perfume, trying to mask the overwhelming stench of blood. She felt like she reeked of Mrs. Merlin, filthy, unbearable. She threw a cloak over Thorn too, warning him, if they saw any patrol officers on the street, stay quiet, don't cry, let her do the talking. He nodded. Luckily, only the rich districts had police. Once they left Garden Villa Street, no one was watching. Half an hour later, Polly drove a light carriage to the hotel. She got Thorn a room and told him to rest. They'd talk more when he woke up. Then she asked for a bath. The attendant said the boiler had been running all night. Hot water ready. She tipped him $1. After the bath, she dried her hair, returned to her room, peeled off her cloak and dress, and changed into her own clothes. That's when she noticed. The blood under her fingernails hadn't washed off. Dark, congealed, brownish red. Polly looked blank. She took a handkerchief and wiped the blood away. The room was quiet. Erik wasn't there. She didn't have the energy to guess where he'd gone. Too much had happened. Her thoughts were scattered. All she wanted was to sleep. Around dawn, Polly woke from a nightmare. In it, she had returned to the modern world, relieved at first. But then Mrs. Merlin's corpse appeared too. The police found her fingerprints on the knife. She was arrested. At trial, she was sentenced, not for murder, but for being from the future. "We believe in God and science," the judge said. "You offend both. You will be executed." The feeling of not belonging anywhere shook her awake. Strangely, she wasn't terrified, just felt her heart pounding violently, even her wrists pulsing with it. She rubbed her eyes, got up to fetch water, only to see a tall figure in the room. Every hair on her body stood up. She forgot the nightmare instantly. She blinked. It was Erik. Relief flooded her. She exhaled shakily and said with a nasal hint of complaint, "Where did you go?" He didn't answer. He stood at her bedside, staring down at her. His gaze was unreadable, searching her for something. Polly shrank slightly. "I didn't mean to stay away last night. I thought Mrs. Merlin was a good person, so I tried to get close to her, to find the freak performers. I didn't know she was with Tricky's crew. She locked me in the basement." Before she could finish, Erik suddenly leaned down. He grabbed her chin, tilted her head, exposing her throat. The white mask hovered close. Inside it, clear breathing. Inhale. Exhale. He sniffed her neck. Polly broke out in goosebumps. Was he trying to identify her by scent? "It's Mrs. Merlin's blood," she blurted. "I didn't want to get stopped by patrols, so I sprayed a ton of perfume. I know it smells weird. It'll fade in a few days." Erik didn't speak. He just kept sniffing her. Polly's scalp tingled. Her heart pounded. She forgot her nightmare completely. Forget the dream. What the hell is he thinking? She had never been able to guess what Erik was thinking. She leaned forward on instinct, wrapped her arms around his waist, and pressed her face into his chest. "I don't know why," she murmured, "but I missed you." It was true. Ever since she met Thorn, that strange bitter ache had lingered in her chest. She didn't know if it was sympathy for him, or for herself. Unbelievably, Erik actually responded. He looked at her profile for a long moment and asked, "What did you miss about me?" His voice was too close. It echoed inside the white mask. Hot, thick, like blood. Maybe it was everything she'd endured that day. Polly felt feverish just hearing him. Her palms still remembered the feel of warm blood, so dirty, so wrong. But under Erik's gaze, that wrongness morphed. The blood became oil, slick, heavy, waiting for a spark. The atmosphere grew strange. She turned her head and rubbed her ear against the pillow. "I don't know. When I got thrown into that basement, I was really scared I'd never see you again. I was scared you'd think I ran away." A lie. Erik sniffed again, expressionless. He knew she'd been shoved into the basement. He was there, but she never mentioned him. Not once. She even had the energy to sweet-talk another deformed freak, just like she had once sweet-talked him. "I really want to offer you a job, let you act, tell stories, win over audiences with your talent, not your looks." How many times was she going to repeat that line? He had waited in the shadows, ready to kill Mrs. Merlin. He just wanted her to call his name. Once, he would have come. Instead, she screamed help 100 times, voice growing hoarse, panicked, tearful, but never once said his name. Why? He had watched her stab Mrs. Merlin, watched the blood cover her. She made a mess of herself. For someone else, Erik felt nothing at first. Then came a surge of chaos, like a heart pumping out of control, like every vein screaming. He felt sick. He wanted to drag her into a bath and scrub away that awful smell. But he didn't want to kill her. Not yet. He paused, then asked coldly, "Are you still bleeding?" Polly froze, then realized what he meant. "That ended," she said. "Only lasts about a week." He said nothing. But in his mind, a new thought took root. If not blood or water, was there another way, another kind of liquid that could wash away every trace of someone else on her? Something that would make her entirely his. Again? The next day, Polly found Thorn and asked if he'd be willing to stay on as a performer. After surviving such a terrifying night, Thorn seemed to have matured. He was no longer the panicked mess he'd been. Hearing her question, he lowered his head and thought for a moment, then whispered, "I'm willing." Polly patted his head. "Good boy. My name is Polly Clement. Just call me Polly." Thorn blushed and mumbled, "Miss Clement." "Call me Polly." His face turned even redder, but he stubbornly stuck with Miss Clement. Polly corrected him twice and eventually gave up. Thorn was older than she had guessed, almost 15. It was just that years of malnutrition made him look more like 12. Polly felt a strange compassion for him. She took him to get a good meal, then asked a hotel attendant to help him bathe and shave. At first, Thorn was cooperative, until he realized that shaving meant removing the sack from his head. He clutched it tightly and let out a piercing scream. Polly coaxed him gently for a long time before he tearfully agreed, on the condition that only Polly could be in the room. She considered it and agreed. Having lived in pricey Los Angeles during her school years, Polly had often cut her own bangs and trimmed split ends. Giving someone a buzz cut wasn't beyond her skill set. Thorn finally summoned the courage to remove the sack. Truth be told, his appearance wasn't frightening at all. The lump on his face resembled a cranial overgrowth or a benign lipoma. Polly, being someone who watched horror films while eating dinner, didn't even flinch. She gently shaved his head with practiced care. Thorn kept watching her expression, anxious and cautious. When he saw she wasn't the least bit repulsed, unlike others before, his dependence on her deepened. He began following her around almost constantly. Polly didn't think much of it. Her mind was on something else. Mrs. Merlin had died without ever revealing the whereabouts of the other deformed performers. If she was going to start a circus, she had to find them. She couldn't do it alone. She needed Erik's help. But for some reason, Erik had been acting strangely around her lately. Especially that day when she shaved Thorn's head, he stared at her hands for over 10 minutes. His gaze was so cold, it seemed to freeze the air itself. Polly felt suffocated. Does he think giving someone a buzz cut is an insult? That I'm humiliating Thorn? She wouldn't blame him for thinking that. In some cultures, shaving someone's head is considered a form of public shaming. I think you misunderstood. She quickly explained. I didn't shave his head to humiliate him. It's just that he hadn't bathed or washed his hair in ages. If we didn't cut it off, his scalp could have become infected. Erik didn't comment, but his gaze never left her fingers. Polly felt her skin crawl. Her heart pounded wildly. His expression was unreadable, so much so that if he had suddenly pulled out a knife and chopped off her fingers, she wouldn't have been surprised. On a whim, Polly asked, "Your hair's getting long too. Want me to give you a trim?" He gave her a look she couldn't decipher, then nodded. Polly was completely bewildered. This was the same man who flinched when she looked at him too directly, and now he was letting her cut his hair. She draped a clean cape around him, wet her fingers, and gently combed through his hair. He visibly tensed, eyes squeezing shut, Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Polly suddenly remembered. Erik wasn't much older than Thorn. 2, maybe 3 years. But he was more developed. Taller, stronger, with longer fingers and a more prominent Adam's apple. More testosterone too. The thought startled her. She pushed it aside quickly and focused on cutting his hair. He had a lot of it. It seemed freshly washed, carrying a faint scent of soap. Cool and dry to the touch. The hair on the nape of his neck was trimmed short, coarse and prickly, but the hair on his forehead was soft and fine, like animal down. Her fingers tangled with his hair and it gave her goosebumps. Trying to ignore her racing heartbeat, Polly reached out and gently lifted his bangs. Suddenly, Erik grabbed her wrist. Polly froze, but he quickly let go, as if telling her to go on. She took a deep breath and gave his bangs a layered trim, then used the clipper to clean up the hair around his temples. When she shaved Thorn's head, her mind had been completely calm. But while cutting Erik's hair, her thoughts became increasingly strange. Maybe it was just her imagination, but his hair felt more alive. Especially after trimming the sides, the stubble left behind was dark and bristly. She almost felt drawn to it. For the first time, Polly realized that cutting someone's hair could feel strangely intimate. Her breathing quickened. It must be the stress of recent events, she told herself. Erik's the only guy around. That's probably why I'm thinking like this. It'll pass. When she finished, she stepped back and studied her work. Not bad. Erik suddenly stood up and removed the cape as if ready to leave. Polly quickly stopped him. Wait. He paused and turned slightly. She noticed the tips of his ears were red, like a rash. Allergic to the clippers? What is it? He cut her off, seeing her stare. Polly came back to her senses. Can I ask a favor? Mrs. Merlin never told us where the other performers were. Could you help me find them? He paused. His tone turned slightly odd. Don't you already have Oliver Thorn? Thorn doesn't know anything, she said, puzzled. He's not like you. He can't carry a whole circus by himself. Erik didn't reply. Polly stepped closer and tugged at his coat, pleading, Please. You're so smart. I know you'll find them quickly. Help me, please. After a few seconds, he slipped his coat from her grasp and turned to leave. Though his tone had remained indifferent throughout, Polly knew he had agreed. She pondered it. So, he not only had this strange, gentlemanly conduct around women, he also couldn't resist a girl's soft, pleading voice. With Erik's help, they quickly located the rest of the deformed performers. One of Tricky's assistants, after seeing both Tricky and Boyd die mysteriously, contacted a ship captain and tried to smuggle 5 of them, including Emily, to London. The others were a dwarf, a giant, a lizard man with reversed knees, and a girl with elephantiasis in her lower limbs. Just by looking at them, the captain knew what kind of goods the assistant was trafficking. He demanded £500 in transport fees, or they wouldn't be allowed to board. The two argued endlessly at the dock. They were cautious, never once mentioning freaks, only referring to them as cargo. Polly had visited the dock herself, but didn't recognize the assistant. He had disguised himself as a sailor, darkened his cheeks, added a mustache, and spoke only Spanish. She had no idea how Erik managed to identify him in the crowd. After rescuing the performers, Polly rented a villa on the outskirts and settled them there. The Bigfoot girl was named Marbelle. She had soft, golden hair. Tricky had beaten her mother to get her, and soon after, her mother had died from grief. "Ever since," she whispered, "no one's ever rinsed my hair with vinegar again. It's all rough now." The giant was Theodore, towering at 2.4 meters. Polly was startled to meet someone taller than Erik. She kept her distance and merely shook hands, greeting him politely. The dwarf and lizard girl were named Francis and Flora. For some reason, Francis disliked Polly and rolled his eyes at her constantly. Flora, however, was a beauty-loving little girl. When she learned she wouldn't have to act like a lizard anymore, she cheered, hugged Polly's neck, and wouldn't let go. Francis sneered. "So that's it? You're all just going to forget the kindness of Mr. Tricky?" Marbelle spat. "To hell with that bastard. He killed my mom. If he weren't already dead, I'd stomp him to death with my own feet." Theodore remained silent. Flora declared, "I don't want to be a lizard girl. I want to dance ballet and be a beautiful lady." Francis snapped, "With knees like yours, you'll only ever be a lizard. No one wants to see a lizard girl dance ballet." Polly watched coldly, beginning to suspect Francis wasn't a victim. He was part of the problem. Compared to the others, dwarves weren't uncommon. Many troupes even featured dwarf couples in their shows. Given how expensive the ship fare was, an extra passenger meant an extra £100. There was no reason to smuggle Francis unless he served another purpose, surveillance. Seeing the growing conflict, Polly thought for a moment, then pulled out her wallet and handed Francis $2. "If you don't want to stay here, then go." Francis was stunned. "They're a bunch of lazy freeloaders. And you'd rather have them than me? I'm telling you, I know how to make money. You'll regret this." "I won't," Polly said calmly. He snatched the money and stormed out. As soon as he left, the others began complaining about him. How petty and mean he was. They were relieved to see him go. Polly comforted them, then went to the kitchen and baked a pie topped with cream and chocolate sauce. It wasn't fancy, but it instantly won over the two girls. Theodore gave a polite nod. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Polly replied. As Marbelle ate, she kept staring at her own feet. Polly had tied a white lace ribbon around her swollen knees, and she was overjoyed, smiling all evening. Flora exclaimed that this place was paradise, with a roof, gas lamps, cream, and chocolate sauce. She wanted to stay with Polly forever. Polly wished them all good night and went to her own room. Before falling asleep, she found herself wondering, where was Erik? He had disappeared again ever since rescuing the group. Francis walked away from the villa, still cursing. "That clueless woman chose those freaks over me," he spat. "She has no idea what I can do, or how much Mr. Tricky valued me." To the average audience, dwarves were symbols of hard work, kindness, and craftsmanship. Francis had made a fortune off this stereotype, conspiring with Tricky to buy cheap trinkets in one town, then sell them in the next under the label handmade by dwarves. They profited massively by playing on public perception. Flush with cash, Francis had begun to look down on the other performers, believing he, like Tricky, was their master. But then Tricky died, and now he had been kicked out by a woman. A circus run by a woman? Unthinkable. It was like letting a woman on a ship. It was doomed to sink. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He started yelling in the street, "Who needs her job anyway? If she hadn't meddled, I'd already be in London, raking it in. Stupid BTTH ruined everything. When I'm rich, I'll hire someone to sell her to a whorehouse." And she was even dumb enough to give him $2 before he left. Perfect for a drink. Francis flipped the coins and walked into a dimly lit tavern, unaware a shadowy figure was following him. $2 was enough for one bottle of Kentucky whiskey, and he wasn't even allowed to drink it inside. The bartender said he looked too much like a child, and it would hurt the tavern's reputation. Fuming, Francis paid and left. "To hell with them. I have a full beard," he muttered. Just excuses. They all looked down on dwarves. But it didn't matter. He'd be rich soon. He took a big swig. Tomorrow, he'd audition for a troupe. Get a contract. In less than 2 months, no, 1 month, he'd be rich and respected again. "When I'm rich," he mumbled. "Just wait, you damn woman. When I'm rich." Then, he felt a sharp pull around his neck. Before he could curse, crack, His spine snapped. Flesh tore. His head hit the ground with a thud. Erik looked down at the severed head. Ever since he saw Polly living alongside those deformed performers, his murderous urges had been growing. This isn't right, he told himself. I shouldn't be feeling this way because of her. But the rage only grew stronger. Watching her welcome them into the villa, pick out clothes, bake pies, shake hands, hug them. For a moment, he had wanted to kill every single person in that house. He'd looked away, tried to calm down, but everything around him screamed of violence. Table knives, forks, shattered plates, curtain cords, fireplace pokers, coal tongs, even the antlers above the mantel. They were all potential weapons. This place could become a slaughterhouse at any second. But why? Why would he kill? Because of her? Francis's blood crept toward Erik's shoes, soaking the tips. But the violent urge still simmered, wrapping around him like vines, tightening, suffocating. He shut his eyes, but then saw her fingers cutting Thorne's hair. The thought of her hands running through Thorne's hair, absorbing his scent, made Erik want to snap the boy's neck. It was insane. Worse, ever since she'd cut his hair, he'd felt phantom touches on his scalp. The head was the most vulnerable spot. The face, his forbidden zone. And yet, her touch lingered. Like her fingers had reached the edge of his mask, ready to peel away his final layer. It left him anxious, exposed, his chest clenched, his heart pounded erratically, almost spasming, like he'd caught an incurable disease. He didn't know what it was, only that he was hot, thirsty, and something inside him kept collapsing, again and again, with no end. When Polly woke up, she was startled. The villa she had rented was a temporary arrangement. The landlord thought New Orleans was too humid, full of snakes, bugs, and rodents. At night there were wolves howling, foxes shrieking, and wild boars crashing into the fences. So, the landlord listed the place in a newspaper ad. As soon as Polly saw the listing, she rented it immediately. The landlord was so eager to leave that he packed up and moved out in a hurry, leaving even the valuable furniture behind. Polly had planned to go back to the hotel the next morning to retrieve her clothes, but when she woke up, the bed was already piled with garments. At first, she thought Erik had brought her clothes from the hotel, but upon closer inspection, she realized they were all brand new. A full set, corset, gloves, hat, stockings, shoes, satin hat ribbons, a white velvet dress, a soft yellow sash, and a white cashmere overcoat. Polly felt a tangle of emotions. He had even chosen the accessories for the hat. What was this supposed to mean? She tried to recall details from the original novel, hoping to find a clue. But nowhere in the book did it say that Erik enjoyed dressing women up like dolls. That said, his obsessive need for control was well documented. In the original story, he didn't allow anyone else to enter Box 5 at the Opera House, nor did he tolerate any performer he deemed substandard. The soprano he tossed into the boiler in the horror version? A perfect example. After all, his mastery of music, architecture, and illusions, every one of those disciplines required a strong will and an iron grip. So it was only natural he'd want to control her too. As long as he didn't kill her, she could live with that. Besides, she often had no clue what to wear in the morning. This actually saved her some decision-making time, so Polly cheerfully changed into the dress. What really stunned her was that not only did the dress fit perfectly, but the corset, gloves, hat, stockings, and shoes matched her measurements exactly. When did Erik take her measurements? The shoes especially shocked her. Ever since arriving in this world, she'd never worn a pair that fit. At the circus, she wore someone else's old, cracked gray leather shoes, so big they practically dangled off her feet. She had to hook her toes just to keep them on. Later in town, she only managed to find shoes that barely fit. Men's shoes didn't come in sizes that small. Women's shoes were either too soft, made entirely of silk, or too stiff, like rubber-soled boots, forcing her to tape her toes and heels to avoid bleeding blisters. She did have one pair of sneakers in her backpack that fit decently, but they were precious. If they broke, she had no replacements, so she never wore them. Technically, there were shoemakers in New Orleans, but the good ones had 6-month waiting lists. Polly looked at the shoes now on her feet. White soft leather, not a flashy design, almost simple. The uppers featured delicate cutout symmetrical patterns, while the soles had intricate floral carvings in the Baroque style. As she stared, a strange thought popped into her mind. Could these shoes have been handmade? By Erik? Shoes that fit this perfectly could only be custom made. No shop-bought pair could match the precise curve of her foot like this. But why would he make shoes for her? And how did he even get her measurements? Did he somehow deduce everything just from seeing the shoes she wore? Or had he entered her room while she slept, and with his eyes or a measuring tape or his own hands, traced the length and shape of her feet inch by inch? Her heart skipped a beat. What unsettled her most was the sensation that these shoes were warm, as if it wasn't leather beneath her feet, but Erik's bony, long-fingered hands holding her soles. She had the urge to take them off and slip into her usual flats, pretending nothing had happened. But deep down, she really wanted to know, why did Erik do this? And even more, how would he react when he saw her wearing them? Her thoughts spiraled, one weird idea after another. Would he still want to kill her? Would he still sneak up at night and wake her with a blade? Why did he dress her like a porcelain doll and handcraft shoes for her? Was it all in her head? Or was their dynamic truly becoming ambiguous? Polly had only been in 2 short, half-hearted relationships. Each time, the guy pursued her, then backed off when her introversion became apparent. She didn't like parties, bars, or outdoor activities. Many men got excited when they heard she liked horror movies, thinking she'd get scared and dive into their arms. In reality, horror movies were just her dinner companions. Apart from a few male co-workers, her experience with men was limited. Maybe that's why she was starting to misinterpret things with Erik? She didn't know. Her thoughts were a mess. Something was slipping off track. She was acutely aware that this was wrong, abnormal, and should be corrected. It even felt a little immoral. Erik might be several years younger than her, but then again, the danger he carried overshadowed any moral dilemma. He could kill her at any moment. She barely had time to worry about his age. No, wait. Polly clenched her eyes shut and shouted, "Stop," in her mind several times. She was shocked by her own thoughts. All he did was give her a pair of shoes that happened to fit, and she managed to think this much? She was either starved or just really bored. With that, she shoved the thoughts away and left the bedroom to scout locations for the circus performance. The Bigfoot girl Marbell, like Emily, needed a wheelchair for life and couldn't leave the house. Theodore was incredibly quiet. Polly didn't know much about him and didn't dare take a 2.4-meter giant along. 4-legged girl, Emily had endured the worst. She'd been forced into abortion, sold to Tricky, nearly killed for her body parts. Even though she was free now, her mood hadn't improved. She just softly whispered a thank you to Polly. Only Thorn and Flora were fit to accompany her. Flora's knee joints bent backward, but it didn't affect her walking. She was sweet-looking, lively, and very clingy. Polly was more than happy to have her tag along. Before leaving, Polly handed Marbell a pistol and whispered, "If Theodore acts suspicious, shoot him." She didn't give one to Emily, for fear she might use it on herself. Marbell might be disabled in her legs, but her hands were steady and strong. Even after losing her mother, she hadn't collapsed. She fought to live harder than anyone. Giving her the gun was the right choice. Marbell accepted it silently and tucked it under her petticoat. "Don't worry, Miss Clement," she said. "I won't let you down." They all called her Miss Clement. No matter how she tried, she couldn't get them to stop. Polly patted her head and left with Flora and Thorn, driving into town. She first went to the local newspaper and paid to place a hiring ad, seeking 2 maids, 1 cook, 1 footman, 1 carriage driver. Address, 108 Garden Villa Street. Pay negotiable, honesty preferred. Next, venue hunting. She had no intention of renting a theater or concert hall, too expensive. She had the money but didn't want to waste it on rent. Who said circuses could only do acrobatics or magic, or parade freaks across a stage? Her real plan was to build a haunted house, but not just any haunted house. Modern haunted houses were cutthroat, and they were single-use entertainment, mostly drawing out-of-town visitors. This was the 19th century. Trains existed, but most people wouldn't ride one just for a haunted house. To make a profit, she had to tour different cities like other theater troupes. So she couldn't rely on elaborate sets or massive mechanisms. By the time she finished building, the audience would be gone. She had to simplify the props and effects. And conveniently, she had a master of trapdoors and illusions by her side. Suddenly, she understood why the circus manager and Tricky Terry had been so desperate to recruit Erik. With him around, no problem was unsolvable. All the trapdoors? He could do them. All the magic? He could do it. The music, the backstage sound effects, even the ambiance of the haunted house. All his domain. He was a one-man production crew. He could bring any wild idea to life. The only issue was how to convince him to help. But then again, maybe that wasn't a problem. Polly glanced at her shoes. Whether or not there was something romantic between them, their relationship had clearly changed. He was a wild beast who didn't understand human ways, but she could stop him from hunting her. He was a rare genius, but she could make him work for her, even if he still posed a life-threatening risk. She had to admit, taming a beast felt unbelievably good. She knew it was dangerous thinking, but she couldn't help it. Erik had completely scrambled her thoughts with this one pair of shoes. She could barely think straight. Polly approached a few tavern owners to ask if they'd rent out space for a circus performance. The first few refused immediately, without even seeing her. Finally, one owner seemed confused. Circus? Performance? This stage is tiny. Good enough for singing or dancing, but acrobatics? Fire hoops? You serious? Polly briefly explained her idea. The owner was stunned. He had never heard of such a performance. Afraid it would damage the bar's reputation, he still refused. Polly said, "No worries, you just rent me the space. I'll cover all drinks that night. Free booze for the crowd. Even if it flops, no one will blame your bar." The owner thought it over and decided she might be some clueless rich girl. One of those heiresses out chasing novelty instead of staying home. In the end, tempted by profit, he agreed. With one condition, she had to pay for the drinks before the show. They signed the contract. Polly drove back to the villa. After a full day of running around, her thoughts had cleared. All she wanted now was a bath and sleep. She had dinner, took a long soak, slipped into a cotton nightgown, wrapped a towel around her damp hair, and returned to her room. The moment she stepped in, a chill ran down her spine, like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on her. Erik was in her room. There were no lights on, but she could feel his eyes on her, his gaze tangible. She couldn't see him. He seemed to lurk in every shadow. Polly closed the door calmly and said, "Good evening. Something you need?" Footsteps echoed in the dark, approaching. He came to stand right in front of her. His breath brushed the top of her head. At first, his breathing always reminded her of killers in horror movies. No matter how fast the victim ran, that heavy breathing was always behind them. But somehow, over time, his breath had changed meaning. Polly stood still, and a wild, dangerous thought slipped into her mind. When he measured her feet, did he breathe like this? Did he stand beside her bed, watching her? Her chest tensed. She forced the thought away. The twisted blend of guilt and triumph made her shiver in a weird way. But then, her heart skipped a beat. Erik snapped his fingers. Instantly, the room lit up with flickering candlelight. He stood against the wavering glow, his white mask hiding all emotion. Polly rarely met his gaze directly, but tonight, his eyes had a strange pull. She couldn't look away. His eye sockets were deep, and his stare was like two hooks, burrowing into hers, tugging on her blood vessels, pulling at her nerves. Her breathing slowed. Her whole body relaxed involuntarily, as if some strange power had taken over her body, moving her feet step by step toward him. In the candlelight, his eyes looked like they'd turned gold, like a beast, thrilled by the hunt. Golden eyes. That was Erik's eye color in the original book. The original book. Polly suddenly snapped out of it and took 2 steps back. "Why did you hypnotize me?" Erik said nothing. Polly swallowed, heart racing. Then it hit her. She'd once wondered what other master titles Erik had, besides music, architecture, and illusions. Now she remembered. He was also one of the world's top hypnotists. Polly wiped her cold sweat. She felt like she'd stumbled upon a treasure trove. If only Erik could come back with her to the modern world. With his skills, they could make the haunted house legendary. Erik stared at her emotionlessly. He didn't know why he'd hypnotized her either. Maybe it was because she looked so scared. Her face pale, breathing rapid, cheeks flushed sickly, swallowing again and again. He just wanted her to stop being afraid of him. But he had failed. So he looked away coldly and muttered, "It's none of your business." She needed his help, so she didn't argue. But now that she thought about it, could her recent restlessness be because he'd been hypnotizing her? Polly knew full well that hypnosis didn't work like that. Generally, to hypnotize someone, you had to earn their trust. use psychological cues, and guide them into a deeper state of relaxation. The reason she was hypnotized just now was because first, she believed Erik had the ability to control her, and second, he snapped his fingers. It was like those movies where the hypnotist swings a pocket watch in front of the subject's eyes. He had ignited the candles in her room out of thin air right before her eyes. That further solidified her belief in his power, so she relaxed and let him control her movements. Her scattered thoughts these days felt less like hypnotic after effects and more like... Polly stopped herself right there. Too dangerous. She couldn't go down that path. And yet, her gaze drifted toward him again. Somehow, he seemed taller than before, definitely over 6 feet 3 inches now, and no longer the skeletal figure he once was. His arms, waist, and thighs were gradually filling out with lean, powerful muscle. The kind of body that radiated predatory, masculine appeal, even more so than when he hypnotized her. He was no longer the sickly, thin boy. He was growing into a formidable man. Polly suddenly felt like there was no escape. It was like being hunted, his aura pressing in from all sides. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed her chin, turning her face sharply to the side. He hated being stared at. Polly snapped out of it, cursing herself for spacing out. She'd been staring too intensely and almost forgot why she came here. She cleared her throat and stepped forward. Remember how I mentioned starting a circus? He gave no reply, as usual. Polly continued. The preparations are mostly done, but we're still missing one critical piece. He glanced at her. Money? You. He paused, then let go of her chin. Go on. Polly wasn't sure how to describe the haunted house she had in mind, so she tried to ease into it. Do you know what a mirror maze is? The kind they have in traditional circuses? Before she could finish, a shadow fell over her. He suddenly stepped closer and grabbed her throat, lifting her chin forcefully. Who told you about that? What? Polly froze. He stared into her eyes. Why did you bring up mirror mazes? I was just giving an example. The cold suspicion in his eyes sent a chill down her spine. For a moment, it felt like they were back to the beginning of their relationship. I want to build something like a mirror maze, only more elaborate. A haunted house. Cough, please let go, I can't breathe. He kept his gaze on her for a long time before finally loosening his grip. Polly collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. As she caught her breath, her mind raced, trying to recall anything in the original novel about mirror mazes. Nothing came to mind. So why was his reaction so intense? Wait. Her pupils contracted slightly. Cold sweat broke out across her back. She remembered now. In the original novel, Erik had once designed a torture chamber, based on the concept of a mirror maze for the royal palace in Mazundaran. The chamber was a perfect hexagon, filled with iron trees, blinding lights, temperature control mechanisms, and an array of mirrors, flat, concave, and convex. Once triggered, the mirrors would rotate on their axes, overlapping beams of reflected light. The temperature would soar like hellfire. Any prisoner locked inside would lose their mind within hours, and often ended up hanging themselves from the iron trees. No wonder Erik had reacted so violently. He thought she'd been in contact with the Persians. She had to think of a cover story, fast. Polly said, I told you, I don't see the performers as disposable. I want the audience to remember each one. To pay for their stories, not their appearances. A few seconds passed. Erik's expression gradually calmed. What's your plan? Marbelle's big feet are rare, yes, but not one of a kind. What's truly unique is her story. Go on. Polly steadied her breathing and continued calmly. Think about it. How many people have lived through what she has? Born deformed, sold off by Tricky, I plan to rent a villa or tavern and turn her story into a script. Not a stage play, but something immersive. In my vision, the audience won't come just to watch Marbelle's story. They'll come to become her, to feel what it's like to be judged, hunted, sold, with no place to hide. Of course, Marbelle's just the beginning, Polly added. If we make enough money, I want to adapt Emily's story next. Flora's too. Erik didn't speak, but Polly noticed. He was no longer wary. His eyes burned like golden fire. She had piqued his interest. Humans are strange, she said. They'll pay to be scared. Freak shows, haunted relics, horror novels. It's all about the thrill. Fear triggers the most primal instincts, hunger, survival, and... She stopped mid-sentence. Fear triggers primal instincts. Was that part of the reason her feelings for him were getting so complicated lately? Anyway, she took a deep breath. A lot of people don't even know they're addicted to fear. That adrenaline rush, elevated heart rate, breathlessness, it's addictive. In my concept, the audience plays as Marbell. After escaping Tricky and Boyd, they must confront their inner demons, played by Marbell herself, before they can leave the house. In the process, they'll not only feel fear, but the joy of survival. Unlike a freak show, this experience means something. Polly's voice firmed. I'm certain, once they play it once, they'll come back again and again just to relive the thrill. She turned to him. And honestly, I only have this idea because you're here. Only you can bring something this complex to life. Without you, it's all just words on paper. He seemed to be thinking. Polly grew uneasy, worried he'd bring up the mirror maze again, or that her earlier slip would affect his attitude. Time passed. Finally, his low voice sounded beside her ear. I'll help you make it real. Polly's heart thumped hard. Your idea? He paused, as if choosing his words, is perfect. She felt a strange, secret tremor in her chest. Her senses were blunted. She couldn't tell if it was relief, joy at being recognized by a genius, or simply heartache. But was it really heartache? Or was it just infatuation with fear? When facing fear, people experience the fight or flight response. Racing heartbeat, dilated pupils, rapid breathing, adrenaline spikes. It's almost indistinguishable from falling in love. Polly stared at Erik, unblinking. She no longer avoided his masculinity. She forced herself to look, really look, at him from head to toe. His jawline was striking, clean, sharp angles. The lines were bold, elegant, almost sculptural. His Adam's apple protruded. His knuckles, wrists, and bones had a sharp grace. There was a unique aesthetic to him. Aside from his face, he was practically flawless. She felt the power of hypnosis descend again. Step by step, she moved toward him, almost involuntarily. But her mind had never been clearer. She asked herself, if she saw his face, would she still feel that thrill? Would she still have the courage to fall for fear? Then he lowered his gaze. Their eyes met. From her perspective, his eyes were beautiful, cold, mysterious, like a predator's. There was something intoxicating in them. Just one look, and her body grew warm, her limbs soft. This idea is my greatest secret, she said. And it was the truth. She had told him everything. He was smart. It wouldn't take much for him to realize. She wasn't Polly Clement. People build trust by exchanging secrets. She was nothing special, but this secret was all she had to offer. And she wanted to make a trade. So, can I? Her breath hitched. See your face? The atmosphere froze. The strange intimacy disappeared. He grabbed her face, leaned in, and demanded, why do you want to see my face? It was the first time he'd directly addressed this topic. Polly was stunned, then said, I just want to understand you better. I promise I won't. He cut her off coldly. I'm not Oliver Thorne. Whatever you said to him doesn't work on me. Polly was speechless. Wait, how did he know what she said to Thorne? How did he know she said that line? I hope this is the last time you ask, he said, voice like ice. If you do it again, I'll kill you. Polly didn't know if her senses were malfunctioning, but it didn't feel like he would. In the past, whenever he threatened her, it was with cold silence. He'd use a knife, grip her throat. Silent, suffocating violence. She would have to beg, plead, and wriggle her way out. This time, he only held her face and said a lot of words. It almost felt like bluffing. Was she going crazy, or was that actually true? For a moment, Polly couldn't tell what she was thinking. Whether this was attraction, fear, or just curiosity about the unknown, she lifted her hand and placed it on his. He wore black gloves. Her fingers touched cold leather, but he instantly jerked his hand back, stepping away like she'd burned him. Polly took a small step forward. How would you kill me? He stared at her, breathing hard, body rigid, like she was the one threatening him. With a knife? Rope? Gun? She asked, batting her lashes. Or your hands? He didn't respond, just glared, as if trying to push her back with sheer force. If I could choose, she said, I'd want it to be your hands, because your hands are beautiful. She realized she sounded kind of unhinged, but wasn't he even crazier? He'd stalked her, hypnotized her, sneaked into her room at night to measure her feet. Who knew how he got her exact body measurements? Now she was just giving him a taste of his own medicine, and he looked at her like he was the victim. Seriously? Who was tormenting who here? She used to be a cheerful, wholesome adult woman. No smoking, no drinking, favorite hobbies, gaming and watching horror movies over dinner. He was the one who gave her addiction a face. He was the one who made her crave that adrenaline. He dragged her into this warped relationship. She was the victim. So why did he get to look so betrayed? At some point, their roles had reversed. He turned his face away, jaw clenched tight. A thick vein bulged in his neck. Polly felt that if she took one more step, he'd surrender. But then he yanked her hair, dragging her back. "Do you think I won't kill you?" He'd pulled her hair before. Those times she'd frozen, drenched in cold sweat. This time, she realized, even that pain gave her a little thrill, like when she trimmed his hair that day. He seemed to remember too. His arm tensed. His Adam's apple bobbed violently. Then, he let go. Polly was about to press her advantage when the room went black. He had extinguished the candles, somehow without touching them. By the time she found a match and lit one again, he was gone. Polly stood there and started to wonder, had she gone too far? If he got angry enough to stop helping with the haunted house, what would she do then? Polly was a bit worried that Erik would vanish again, which would put her haunted house plans on indefinite hold. But to her surprise, when she woke up the next morning, there was yet another full outfit laid out on her bed. Polly, she dressed in silence, deeply conflicted. Honestly, if Erik ever opened a clothing boutique, he could probably make a fortune. After breakfast, Flora told her that a middle-aged woman had come by in response to the help wanted ad in the newspaper. The moment Polly heard middle-aged woman, she thought of Mrs. Merlin and grew wary. She'd already been burned once, not again. The applicant turned out to be a large, sturdy black woman. Her previous employers had all called her Auntie Freeman. Auntie Freeman was quick with her hands and feet, spoke plainly, and had worked as a caretaker in a sanatorium, specifically tending to women with nervous breakdowns. When she heard she might need to care for 3 deformed individuals, she didn't even flinch. "I can take care of people like that," she said. Polly studied her and asked, "But I'm not looking for just a nurse. I want someone I can trust like family. Can I trust you?" She said this on purpose. When an employer rushes to play the "we're family" card, it usually means one thing: they don't intend to pay properly. If Auntie Freeman were a scammer or a thief, she would have instantly latched onto the family label to get inside the villa. But if she were honest, her first reaction would be, "This boss is trouble." Sure enough, Auntie Freeman frowned slightly and said, "Miss Clement, my skin may be black, but my conscience is clear. Many folks look down on us free blacks. I wouldn't dare presume to be family. I don't ask you to treat me like one. Just treat me like a factory worker and pay me on time." Polly apologized for her rudeness and pulled out a prepared contract. "Of course I'll pay you on time," she said. "Here's the agreement. It outlines your duties, working hours, and monthly wages. If I ever fail to pay you, you can take this to arbitration. And naturally, if you slack off, I can use this contract to hold you accountable as well." "I understand," Auntie Freeman said. "I can read. I'm not one of those uneducated folks who think all paperwork is a scam." She read through the contract, signed her name, and stamped her fingerprint. "I know signing this helps protect me too." Polly was very pleased and let her pick any room she liked. Auntie Freeman chose a servant's room on the first floor. Her reason? It was closer to the kitchen and more convenient for work. With the first interview going so smoothly, Polly almost thought she could staff the entire household in a single day. But the next batch of applicants were either slick-talking con men or overly proud of their past work in wealthy homes, and looked down on her troupe of freaks. Auntie Freeman's kind, honest, and pragmatic attitude was a rare gem. It took Polly 2 full days just to settle on a carriage driver. That reminded her, she hadn't seen Caesar in a while. The ill-tempered white Arabian horse had likely been taken by Erik. Caesar only obeyed Erik. Polly didn't miss him. What she did miss was Erik. Ever since that night, he hadn't shown himself again. Yet every morning when she woke, she found a new outfit laid out by her bed. He was still following her, still watching her, still choosing her daily outfits, just not letting her see him. What comforted Polly slightly was that her haunted house notes, including the script she wrote for Marbelle, had been reviewed. He had marked them up in red ink, leaving brief comments like a teacher grading homework. His intellect was terrifying, razor-sharp, logical, and lightning fast. Even in unfamiliar fields, he could grasp concepts with astonishing speed. Sometimes she hadn't even finished a sentence, and he'd already guessed what she meant and offered a brilliant insight. Polly genuinely enjoyed working with him. He was so smart, it made her feel like she hadn't time traveled at all, like she was still talking to a modern person. No, even many modern people didn't have his kind of vision. He had been to so many places, seen so many things, learned so much. He was practically omniscient. He was the most complex person in this world. Polly longed to talk to him face to face. But no matter how she pleaded, or even tried to bribe or threaten, he refused to show himself. She hadn't expected things to turn out like this. Not long ago for him, intimidating her had just been a game to seek physical contact. But now, when she tried to play that game, he sheathed the knife and no longer threatened her at will. Should she be happy or sad? Polly shook her head and pushed the messy thoughts aside to focus on writing. Before the performance officially began, she had one more task: marketing. In modern society, how do you turn someone into a product? You craft a persona. Just like those early reality shows where contestants shared tragic backstories to win votes. That kind of voting appeal may have faded, but the method of building personas and attracting fans had stuck around. In the modern world, audiences had grown sick of the endless personas of celebrities and influencers. Many had become cynical. But thankfully, this was the 19th century. People hadn't seen marketing like this before. Polly planned to write short stories based on her troupe's deformities and publish them in the local newspaper. Next, she'd hire some newsboys to sell the papers around town, at taverns, theaters, restaurants, parks, and plazas. Then she'd hire 2 people to dress as gentlemen and stage a heated argument about the article, maybe even escalate it to the point of a duel, to stir public curiosity. Of course, no one would actually die in a duel. It was just a stunt to make people curious about the paper's content. Polly wasn't a business person. She had no idea if this would work. She was just giving it a try. Many people thought actors only needed to act, but in truth, it was a highly multidisciplinary profession. They didn't just perform the script. They often had to help write it, design their characters' lines, movements, and body language. To become a good actress, Polly had read many books on drama and had some writing experience. Her prose wasn't elegant, but Marbell's story was gripping enough to move people without needing embellishment. When she finished the piece, she went to the local newspaper and slipped the manager some money to have it printed on the front page. The local papers were usually filled with trivial news: lost dogs, runaway cats, a hat dropped on the streetcar, rat infestations, and bounties for exterminators. She showed up in male attire, refined and handsome. The manager assumed she was a dreamy rich boy with money to burn and didn't even read the content before agreeing. There hadn't been any major news lately anyway. At first, no one paid much attention to Marbell's story, until the staged duel between the gentlemen made headlines. Though the duel didn't happen, it caused quite a stir in the city. People began asking, who is Marbell? Where is this circus? When is it coming to New Orleans? Polly didn't announce the performance date right away. She continued spreading buzz in the taverns and public spaces. She leaked a rumor: anyone who could sit through the entire show without leaving would win $100. If Marbell's story had only sparked small talk, this rumor ignited a firestorm. $100. At the time, even working tirelessly at a sewing machine in a factory would earn just $1 a day. Was the circus manager insane? Or was this a scam before skipping town? The whole city was buzzing. Men and women alike debated the truth behind the rumor. Many were convinced it was a trick. There was no such thing as an unwatchable performance. Unless the manager was playing word games, like making people watch for several days straight without food or rest. What the circus manager clearly didn't understand was, he'd underestimated how desperate the poor were. If $100 was on the line, they'd watch for days without blinking. No food, no sleep, no problem. The commotion even drew the attention of the New Orleans police. The police chief paid Polly a visit and warned her not to play games. If someone really starved to death watching the show, there'd be consequences. But Polly simply smiled and said, "Don't worry, sir. The performance won't last more than 3 hours." Even the chief was intrigued. What kind of show gave her the confidence to make such a bold claim? Polly dared make the promise for one reason: Erik. When she had been writing Marbell's story, she had once spoken aloud to the empty room. I have a bold idea. If it works, we could make a fortune, become the stars of this city. But if it fails, we might end up broke and humiliated. What do you think? Should we do it?" The room was silent, but she knew Erik was there, watching her, breathing in the dark. Sure enough, her words had barely faded when a cold, low voice sounded beside her ear. "What idea?" Polly blinked. "Can we talk face to face?" No answer. Fine, she said with a bit of a pout. "This idea's success doesn't depend on me. It depends on you." After a pause, he replied slowly, "Me? If you can bring my vision to life," she said, "we'll succeed." What Polly didn't know was that, as she spoke, Erik had been standing right behind her. He was long accustomed to hiding in the shadows. Without his permission, she'd never sense him. But he understood exactly what she meant. She was testing his attitude, forcing him to acknowledge their partnership. Her mind was sharper than he'd expected. Though not wise in a grand sense, she was extremely quick-witted. She never hesitated to be seen in public. She even dressed as a man when necessary, laughing with gentlemen and flirting with ladies. He had noticed the oddities about her, like her Eastern accent, even though she supposedly had never been to the East Coast. She wasn't like other ladies, never shy or delicate. Most women wore skirts so long they barely showed their shoes. She, on the other hand, often wore bloomers rolled up to the knees, exposing her pale, clean legs as she walked around the villa. He knew she didn't do this out of wantonness. It likely came from growing up in a more liberal place. Only someone raised with such freedom could be so casual. And yet, seeing her walk around like that made him feel jealous. He didn't understand what he was jealous of, her ease with her body, or the fact that others might see it. The thought made him deeply uncomfortable. Even more so was the realization that this wasn't the first time he had felt jealous. Just the first time he recognized it as jealousy. Why would he even feel that way? Just like that day, when she had pressed closer and closer, asking to see his face, why had he felt panic? She was like a tiny bird resting in his palm. He could kill her easily, but why couldn't he? Her neck was so slender, her bones so fragile. He had nearly broken her neck once before. So why couldn't he do it now? He had wanted to kill her countless times in recent days. But the moment his hand closed around her throat, feeling her pulse, the first thing he felt wasn't killing intent, but a strange electric tremor. He had killed many people. Under his terrifying grip, no one lasted more than 3 seconds. Her skin was warm. Her blood vessels throbbed with life. Her breathing was steady. She was completely unguarded. He could have ended her life in a heartbeat, painlessly, even mercifully. And yet, her body heat wrapped around him like a living thing. He felt his defenses melting. The shadows fled. The darkness faded. Even in sleep, she made him feel exposed, like his mask had been torn off, his gloves removed, nowhere to hide. Most terrifying of all, even at this point, he still couldn't kill her. Just like now, he understood her subtext, her motives, her test. And still, he answered, "I can make it real." His tongue, his thoughts, they betrayed his will. He felt powerless, and he couldn't stop it. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Nuevi Story. Thanks for listening.